the special meeting for Tuesday, February 13, 2018. Mayor Berger will be joining us shortly. She's on the road. Opening statement and roll call, please.
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this special meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner. By the posting of a copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on January 30, 2018. By the faxing of a copy of said notice to the Tri-Town News, Asbury Park Press, and Star Ledger for information and publication on January 30, 2018. By the filing of a copy of said form of notice in the Township Clerk's Office on January 30, 2018. The public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. The public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting or between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of Public Law 1975, Chapter 127, NJAC 17:27. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with emergency exits for your safety. Upon exiting the meeting room, they are to your left and to the right. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Television. Also, no food or beverage is permitted in this room. Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Present.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Nacastro?
Here.
Mayor Berger?
She'll be here shortly. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our troops abroad and our law enforcement and all emergency personnel. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Gagan, take it away.
Good afternoon. Today, we have scheduled OEM Information Technology in the Police Department to present budgets. Due to the change as of late yesterday in OEM, I'll be reviewing their budget. I have our newly minted interim, Victor Cook, here to answer any operational questions that may arise. Each of you were given a packet just with a summary of each of the departments that we're going over today, so you have that in front of you. To review emergency management, the 2018 proposed budget, there was an error in that number. It should read $19,250. That was an error that was just caught recently.
Where we saw,
OEM, here on the long pages, it's
I got
J9.
2 instead of 7.
And then their total operating expenses, their final for 2017 was budgeted at $20,000. They only used $9,685.19. They were requesting $23,220, and through various cuts, I have their O&E down to $13,000. Do you want to go over it each line, or?
What page is that?
On the long forms,
The new
J9?
In the book. You said you wanted to go through the line.
101 if you want to go through the lines.
Does Victor want to come up, just in case?
Come on up, Vic. Have a seat in the hot seat there, in case they have any questions. The salaries will remain flat from 2017 to 2018. If you're looking on page 102, there is the coordinator, and then should be 4 deputies, and then the administrative assistant.
Why are we still looking to buy hazmat?
That was put in this budget prior to me taking over, and the hazmat now, we have a separate fund for that. It's the OEM Trust Fund for hazardous materials. It's paid for by the commercial businesses in town from that ordinance, and that was put in prior to me, having this line item.
So there would be no harm taking it out of the O&E?
Not at this time, no.
So we're removing 20, which that wasn't removed, right, Brian, if I'm correct?
It was requested at 4,000. I had already adjusted 2,500, and I had left 1,500 in that line.
So we're going to remove the 15
Okay?
based on the trust fund and the way the agreements are arranged now with the fire department?
Yes.
And how much is for car wash? Not that I don't support car washes, I do.
You should be abstaining from this one.
It's not my car wash.
720, I thought.
Is that the right number?
720? I thought you put it for 720. He has 720.
He had requested 720. I have that budgeted for $500 under equipment maintenance.
I just have one class about the CERT class equipment. They requested 2,000. You lowered it to 1,000. Some of the equipment or some of the certifications not needed, Brian? Why would it be lowered?
I was looking at how much was expended previously. Last year, they only used $405 out of the 1,000 budgeted.
Okay.
It would be unfair to ask because Victor is just new in it, but the real question is, where are we with the CERT program?
Yeah, if the money was requested because it was
But,
needed,
yeah,
that's the only thing.
I'm not sure if you want,
I can answer that.
Okay.
I mean, I've been involved for 2 years now as a deputy. I can answer that. The CERT class, we were trying to build OEM back up to where it was in prior years. And we finally got a class in, I do believe it was in May, we got our first CERT class back in and graduated. My goal is to continue that and get the numbers back up, because without the citizens of Howell Township, when there's a need for them, when there's a disaster or a catastrophe, when we need to serve people, we need them there to provide support for us. So without them, we have nobody. So my goal is to build them up to good numbers. So, looking at it, there wasn't much money spent on that line item, but, again, if I have my way, I'd like to build that up, because that's our first priority, is getting the citizens and civilians involved.
Well, if more money's needed for that during the year, if you came and asked, I'm sure we could figure something out as a governing body.
Okay, thank you.
I believe there's equipment stockpiled for them in the OEM building too, isn't there?
We have a substantial amount of equipment in the OEM building that can be utilized for the CERT individuals once they graduate.
what's the council's pleasure on capital? Do you want to do capital now, or,
I'm game doing
Yes,
capital.
please.
all right, let's,
Let's get it done.
Okay, they had requested a F-450 utility truck, which in discussing with Victor, we've removed that. And he's requesting the 2 tri-band portable radios to remain.
what happened to the ones that we bought last year?
We have them. We just took delivery of them. They're being programmed. But we have 4 coordinators, actually 5 coordinators, with Chief Lewis. And the plan is to keep the 5 coordinators with a radio and have one as a spare just in case one breaks. And right now, we only have 4 radios. And as you know, Howell Police are operating on a separate bank of frequencies now, the trunk system, and then the county's still on high band, so we need them tri-band radios to communicate with all the different agencies that we deal with. In case of an emergency, we have to deal with all of them different agencies.
So we got the 4 from last year that were budgeted for,
Yes, sir.
and you're asking for 2 more to make 6.
Yes, sir.
Just so you're aware, the police department was requesting portables too, the same type, and in further discussions with Chief Kudrick, we removed those from his request. So I don't know if that weighs into your decision at all. I just wanted to let you know that that's removed. We'll be discussing those in further detail later.
So you removed some?
From the police department, they had requested the purchase of similar portables, tri-band portables.
How many did they request?
No offhand. $8,000 worth.
5.
It's about
Five.
5. $8,000 a radio. I have
8,000 radio?
I have them existing, my supervisors have them already in the cars, so we're okay with that. This was just an addition, just to put more of them with it.
Well, what I was just saying, this is just a thinking out loud. If we replaced some of the police ones that are older and gave them the OEM, which are used less, would that be sufficient?
No, different frequency.
Different frequencies, though?
Different equipment, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only capital, 2 radios.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Anybody else for OEM?
that's all we have for OEM.
Mayor's
Thanks,
here.
Vic.
Thank you. Forgive me.
Which is it? Please?
Next, we have information technology. We just finished up with OEM, Mayor.
Thank you.
We have information technology.
What page in the big book?
In the big book, it's page 17, 17,
Excuse me?
page 17. And on your J sheets are J2, so inclined.
Mayor, council,
Hi,
how are you today?
please.
So, pretty much just before you is our budget. The larger additions that we have are, of course, our capital. There are some smaller additions within the software and maintenance budgets, mainly for the camera system that we just got, the new security system. Every year we have to have a maintenance clause on that. A couple servers that went out of regular, they call it care packs, which is usually either 3 or 5 years. We have multiple servers that went off that, so now we have to sit there and pay for a maintenance fee for every year for those. And we've also bought on with the security systems that we have, our firewalls, we've upgraded to some more expensive packages that the companies are now offering for better security. Our company that does our live firewalls, Raw Security, also has installed a server that basically scans the entire network once a month for vulnerabilities, and it's doing an awesome job. And actually, last month, our the manager's secretary calls us up saying that their system, the camera system, is basically saying that it's being hacked. Well, that's because we were trying to hack it. So it's good to see
Oh,
that
good.
certain things work and everything's going good. But like I said, besides that, the capital is our biggest increase. And if you look at that, there's really nothing we can do, unfortunately. The phone system that we have right now was installed in 2007. By the time we get the new one installed, it'll be almost 2019. So it's going to be 12 years old, and what the company has basically told us this year, well, they told us last year, they told us at the end of the year, unfortunately, we didn't get it into the budget in time, but that they're not going to make or update any of the hardware anymore. So if a piece breaks, we do have extra stuff, we have extra phones, we have extra switches to compensate for that, but nothing else is ever going to be made. And ShoreTel is not going to allow IPC, who is our partner, to touch anything after this year. So we're dead in the water if we do not renew that whole system.
So what system are you going to?
That's going to be the phones. It's going to be ShoreTel. It's going to be an upgrade. The
Okay.
original system, if I'm not mistaken, I wasn't here when it was purchased. I think the original system was around $175,000. They're looking at about $120,000 because we have a lot of stuff in place already. We have the server going. So it's going to be for handsets, switches throughout the township, basically all the, what it's going to take to install everything. So it's going to more or less be an upgrade to our existing system,
Okay.
which will go a lot smoother than putting a new system in its place. And then we haven't had problems with ShoreTel. We definitely wanted to stay with them, so.
I remember last year we talked about putting all of our documents on a server possibly.
Yes.
Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, well, that is also on this. The other thing is we're getting a very large storage server. We do have room right now, we could put more documents on. We're pretty much, we have a good amount of expansion still left, but at the end of this year, it's going to start getting tight. We just installed new backup servers that will be able to easily back up pretty much anything for the next 8-9 years. It's a huge server, and also it's an off-site duplicate this way
Okay.
for disaster recovery. So that's installed, that's in place, everything's running perfectly on that. But this fall, we would like to put in a large capacity storage server.
What would that
And
cost?
It's, I believe I put in for $42,000 for that.
It's not bad, actually.
43. 40, yeah, roughly 43, yeah. So it's going to be a high capacity, it's going to be what they call a hybrid system, so it's going to use basic drives and what's called solid state drives. And it's going to be extremely quick. We're going to try to get a lot of our network upgraded. Right now, we're running everything at what they call it a gigabit, which is fast, but the thing is, unfortunately, everything that goes into that server is still a gigabit. We're going to be basically upgrading a lot of the stuff, so we're going to be running on 10 gigabit network. Be a lot faster for the employees, things will get done faster. And we'll be able to put a lot of information through this network without bottlenecking. So those are pretty much the two things that we are looking for. Again, the storage is big because community development is, scanning in maps and everything else, and everything should be digital. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. I mean, we
Agreed.
shouldn't have paper.
I agree.
So, yep.
Do we have, just as a question, do we have storage off-site
Yes.
that we pay on a monthly basis?
Oh, no, we don't have cloud. We actually have a.
No, I mean on paper documents.
Oh,
Do we have paper documents stored off-site, like in, I forget the name of the,
Yes, in the old rec building over at the old municipal complex.
oh, okay, so we don't pay somebody to have
That
it?
is packed with all kinds of stuff. But that building also has needed some repairs over the years, heating,
Right.
cooling, some of that, the roof repair, a lot of that's been cut out of the capital budget requests over the last few years. It's a problem we're trying to work on by scanning and getting rid of a lot of the documents. I think a lot of that stuff has already been, or some of it's already been scanned. I think the clerk's office has been working on that for years now. And some of it, we have to retain no matter what. We have to keep the paper copies. That's just the DARM laws.
Yep.
What Glenn was referring to in my office, we're doing everything electronically, so we have the paper, we scan it the day we create it. That way we have PDFs of it, properly named, so we can put it into Laserfiche. We don't have to worry about it down the road. So we're increasing our storage capacity exponentially on a daily basis.
Right.
That's a pretty big thing we need to continue here. In reality, storage space is cheap compared to paying a company 10 years from now to come in and scan all of our documents. I don't know if
I'm
you've
aware.
seen some of our file
I'm
rooms lately,
very
but,
aware.
yeah.
You don't have Iron Mountain then, so we don't have any like monthly Iron Mountain fees? Just,
No.
okay. Thank you.
Glenn, this phone system is just for this section of,
It's for the entire township excluding the police department. It's for also the court. The court uses our phone system, library uses our phone system, senior center, DPW, that whole complex over there. And then the police department has their own Avaya system.
Is the server added into software maintenance? Is that in the same line item?
No, the server
Because I don't see the 42,000 on here.
should have been in the capital.
I have it. Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Sorry.
Yep.
I have no questions.
Anybody want to cut anything, or leave it as it is? Or are we going to go back and rehash this when nobody's here? I don't have no problems with what you said. It's all needed. I mean, I was going to ask you what the life expectancy or usefulness of it is, but you don't know.
8 years on the average usually.
Yeah.
I mean, the 10 years that we've gotten out of a lot of the stuff is pretty much unheard of now. So 8 years, I would say, roughly,
It's changing pretty quick, as we
very quick.
Doesn't look like there's any wiggle room.
I don't think so either.
I don't have no problems.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Susan.
You like that, don't you?
Next up, we have the police department, including dispatch and
Oh, I don't want
EMS.
to do that one now. I'm only kidding.
All right, we're done then.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the big book, it starts on page 68.
You don't have it?
In the big book, we're at 68.
It's behind.
And the J sheet started J8 for the police department.
I thought there was one there, I can put down.
This one? When you're ready, chief.
So good afternoon. So this is my third budget cycle I've been at as chief, and I'm still learning as I go. Fortunately, I've had a lot of good people alongside me that was able to help me along. I want to introduce to you the staff that's going to be assisting me today. Operations Captain Mark, if you just raise your hand, Mark Pilecki. So he's in charge of operations, which is the patrol division and also communications. Services Captain John Starro. What falls under him, what we'll be talking about today is traffic safety, fleet maintenance, school resources, training, and EMS. Services Lieutenant Bernie Fowler. He is in charge of our training program, EMS, and also any type of tactical equipment or questions or procedures that we have within our police department. Patrolman Dave Levine, he is assigned to our traffic unit. He is in charge of fleet maintenance. He also has the responsibility and the duties that he handles extremely well is dealing with all the body-worn camera, all the software that's involved in that, the redaction, the retention, and also with the MVRs, all the in-car body cameras that we have, which obviously we all know is so critical in today's law enforcement society. Senior Dispatcher Stephen Garrity, obviously he's in charge of communications, 911, IT, phone, and anything and everything within the police department, Steve Garrity. And EMS Coordinator Peggy Doyle. She's in charge of EMS operations. So those are my three budgets. It's the police department, the communications, and also the EMS. So I just want to start off by thanking all of you up there on the council. We're in tough times, I understand that, and you guys have responsibilities to the people that you serve here within Howell Township. I too have responsibilities to serve and protect and also provide those services to those same residents that you represent. We can all agree that these are challenging times, not only financially, but also in the world of the police department. Not only do we have to do the contemporary law enforcement job that has been done for so many hundreds of years, we also now are relied upon to do ancillary services such as mental health, addiction support and recovery, and also community relations. I think we can all agree that we do all three of those very well here in Howell Township. We wouldn't be able to do those if it wasn't for the support of the council up there, and although sometimes we may not agree on things, when it comes down to it, you do provide me, and I say this quite often, and I do brag about it, and we are pretty much the envy of a lot of other police departments when I say I do get the tremendous amount of support from this town council. Just want to touch on the mental health and things that you may not be aware of. With this ever-increasing mental health problem that we have in our society, which is tied to addiction and recovery, with our homeless population. We now have a mental health coordinator within our police department provided to us by Monmouth Medical. You probably don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize that, but several times a week we have somebody in-house that's dispatched from our police department out within the community, obviously that we serve in the surrounding towns as well. So Monmouth Medical, and I'm right by saying Monmouth Medical, correct? Monmouth Medical saw the need of the amount of mental health cases that they were getting in this area, and so that they asked us, and we provided some space, some tight space for them, but yet we still have that. And you really won't see too many police departments that have a mental health coordinator built right in, free of charge to the residents.
How long
residents of
has
Howell.
that been in place?
About a year now, Fern? This past 2017 is when we implemented it. Obviously, with the addiction and recovery, when I first became chief in 2015, we were in the top 12 of the state, and up there with Atlantic City, Camden, Patterson, Newark, Trenton, Toms River, Jackson, Bricktown. So you could see where the epicenter is really of New Jersey. It was right in this Monmouth and Ocean County, and it hit us tremendously hard. I don't have to go into that. We all know the effects that had on our community. I can proudly report that over the past few months, we're not even in the top 50 anymore. It's to the point that the CFC, who we work with, our recovery support organization that we work with, was concerned, thinking that we weren't calling them anymore. Well, it's gotten to the point, and bail reform is part of it as well, that what we have made, the strides that we've made in our police department here, not only with the enforcement, the education, but the addiction recovery services that we do provide to these addicts, has made a tremendous impact within this town. Again, it was a model for a lot of other police departments here in New Jersey to follow as well. So those are the challenges that we face here. Obviously, with the budget is always another challenge because a lot of those services require the money. We've done a lot internally to change a lot of things around. I just want to talk about overtime because manpower overtime, and I'm going to get into a lot of other specifics before we dive into the actual budget itself, but you just have to understand a little background here before we get into it. I became chief July 1st of 2015. We were trending to have $1.3 million in overtime for the year. July 1st, we were already about $600,000 for the year of 2015, the first 6 months of 2015. I immediately put in some policies in place, some control mechanisms, and we brought that number down to just over $900,000 to complete the year. So basically that, with the help, we all understand unions, how tough they can be sometimes, and I definitely had their support when they realized what we were trying to do here in our police department. We cut that number in half. So if we were trending at about a little over $600,000 for every 6 months, the last 6 months of the year, we trended just above about $300,000. So that is a tremendous impact on a budget. And from that point on, we brought it from $910,000 in 2015 to around $750,000, $760,000 in 2016. And in 2017, I just want to touch on this because you have to understand the things that happened in 2017 this past year. So we ended the year at about $768,000 in overtime. When we initially did the budget, at $700,000, we didn't realize the impact that possibly bail reform would have on us, and also a PERC decision that was made in favor of the union. And that PERC decision basically stated that regardless of what minimum manpower we have, an officer who has accumulated compensatory time off, known as CTO, can take that time off regardless if it causes overtime. So say an officer on Friday has 20 hours comp time in the bank, we're at minimum manpower on an evening squad, he could take that evening shift off and cause overtime. Now, understand, I was implementing similar strategies before this PERC decision was even announced because it just makes sense. If I could just explain it very quickly to you. An officer's shift is 10 hours in our police department. There is with overlaps on evening shift, which runs 1 p.m. to 11 p.m., 10-hour shift. Day shift ends at 4 o'clock, midnight starts at 9. So between 4 and 9 is when I need that coverage for that officer that decides to either call out sick, emergency personal day, or in this case, overtime CTO. So that 5 hours now, I'm replacing with only 5 hours of overtime, which equals 7.5 hours of overtime, and the officer that took off gave back 10 hours of overtime. So it's a net gain for the town of 2.5 hours of overtime. So that, as a result of that officer taking 10 hours, he was replaced with 7.5 hours. So it does make sense. So now going back to last year, $768,000 on a $700,000 projected overtime budget, not realizing what bail reform or what this perk decision would have. So if you take all that time off that an officer gave back to take off, I just want to go over the numbers with you. It was 1,141 hours. At an average of $50 per hour per officer equals $72,050. You take that off to $768,000, we're down to $695,950, $50 less than what I projected it to be for last year. So I'm very proud of that. It's some of the control mechanisms that we put in place in our overtime budget and in our police department. Now, understand, I was talking to Lou earlier this afternoon about that number. If that 1,141 hours weren't used, that's now accumulating at 1.25% interest every year that officer keeps that in his CTO bank. So that liability now has been removed from the town at 1,141 hours at $50 an hour equals $72,000. So we continue to be very cognizant of the overtime, just like you guys have that financial responsibility up there over the town. I just want to let you know that we do the same here, and it's not just me. It's the officers that are sitting behind me, and also both the unions that I deal with, both the PBA and the SOA, who understood this, and obviously we came up with certain policies collectively. You don't see any grievances. You don't see them all mad at me because we did this, because we all realize it. A lot of us live in town here. We all pay taxes. We understand that we do have the responsibility of also controlling the costs within our overtime as well. So I just want to give you that overview before we got into into the actual numbers here, because sometimes you don't see those things that are happening behind the scenes to cause those numbers to react the way that they did.
Well, I would just want to comment, that's quite impressive. I mean, to cut the overtime down that much on an annual basis is very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you really want a number, it's 2.16 million since I became chief, but that's all right.
Who's counting?
So, yeah, exactly. So again, I thank you for giving me a very productive 2017. I take the job as chief of police very seriously. I treat the police department like a business, even though that our bottom line is not profit, it's service to the community, and we try to provide that service at the very highest level possible. We saw the most amount of calls for service in 2017. We topped at 76,000 calls for service. We're trending about 6,500 calls per month. Sometimes a little less, sometimes they're more, but that's basically what the average is. Our response time remains basically the same. Our officers are getting there within 5 minutes of a call, and are spending about, on the average, about on a normal call, about 15 minutes to 20 minutes on each call. We're developing a policy right now that analyzes discretionary patrol time. Again, if you follow me on a 10-hour shift, and on any typical shift, an officer has about 8 hours on the road. So you talk about evening shift where they get on the road, if they're responsible for calls around 2:30, they come off the road at 10:30. So that 8 hours, we're looking at what those officers do within those 8 hours and trying to make the most amount of use as we can out of those officers by doing almost like directed patrol. So when you take out all the calls for service that they went on, their hour-long meal break, sometimes it's less, sometimes they don't get a meal break, but when you incorporate all those numbers in there, we see how much time is left over in an officer's shift, and we try to see what that officer is doing with that time. Then we start adding in motor vehicle stops, motor vehicle enforcement, criminal activity, any type of community relations that officer might do, and see what's left over to be able to proactively go out there and address traffic concerns, to go out there and hit some hot spots in town. We all know, we all get those emails. There's problems throughout the town. I say this all the time. We have a very low crime rate here in Howell Township. For as big as a town that we are, and as what we're surrounded by, we have a very low crime rate, and that's a contribution to everybody. It's a contribution to our residents who partner with the police. It's a residents who, when they see something, they say something, they report it to us, and it's the officers out there on the beat every single day being highly, really? being highly proactive out there on the road. No one can tell me that in the past 3 years, you haven't seen more police officers, a highly visible presence of those officers out on the side of the road, either making motor vehicle stops, at our meet and greets, at any of our community relations, outside, inside our schools. That is a priority that I've had since day one as I became chief of police, and it's definitely a priority of every single police officer that puts on a badge every single day.
Chief, some people complain about it. I asked them, what are they complaining about?
I don't know.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, I have no idea. And I say this all the time, I can lay my head down on a pillow every single night and not worry about how this police department's being run, because I have very competent staff. And I don't say that because I'm up here before you. I say that every single day. I don't check in up on these guys. I don't go home and look what they're doing. I know that the job is being done when I'm not around. And it's very encouraging as a chief of police to have that type of staff. So, obviously, with all our meet and greets, National Night Out, Trunk or Treat, all those things that we've been doing, we've definitely made our mark within the community, and we truly are partnered with our community. As big as a town that we are, we definitely seem like we're a very small town. We have that small town feel where everybody seems to know each other. Everyone seems to know the police officers. A lot of the guys grew up here. But going back to what I was saying about the low crime rate, we do have people dying, though. We have people dying from drug overdoses, and we have people dying from motor vehicle accidents and car crashes, right, and pedestrian crashes. So what do? We have a street crimes unit, crime suppression unit, that goes out there, and really their sole job is to go out there and target those dealers and those users and to try to flip them and get to the ultimate source of where these narcotics are coming from. We've even started luring people from other towns with the help of some technology that we have, luring them back into town where we grab them, and we always hear, and I thought I was in Freehold, or I thought I was in Lakewood. All right, if I knew I was in Howell, I wouldn't have come here. I get texts all the time from my staff saying, another one that we baited into Howell that came here. So the message is out there. They know they don't want to come into Howell because of our enforcement activities. As far as car crashes, I've made I made a priority of every police officer, every road officer to hit those target spots, to stop. You don't have to give a ticket to everybody, just that education component of that motor vehicle stop, to let them know basically that, listen, you can't be doing 50, even though 50 seems relatively slow on Aldridge Road. It's a 40 mile an hour zone. That's one area that we're targeting now. We have hot spots throughout the town, and that's where, when I talk about the expansion of our police department, it's not so much expansion of the numbers as far as a budget, it's expansion of our services that we provided. We've expanded our Class 2 program now, where our part-time police officers are now supplementing patrols on the road. So we were able to find some funds that we can now use to take these police officers, supplement the road officers out there on the road when they're short, or to do other components of the job that would cause overtime for a normal police officer. Now these part-time officers are doing it. So when they're not out there answering calls, they are hitting those target spots that we all hear about every day in our emails and our telephone calls around town. Again, that's some of the insights, some of the things that we're doing here in town, not only to decrease our overhead, but to increase our services as well. So that's basically an overview of my budget highlight. We can start with, I know the two budgetary items, the big items are always technology, it's personnel costs, and it's, well, I should say three, and vehicles. So if you want to touch on it, all of those, I'll be glad to talk about them.
Want some questions?
Okay.
Want some questions?
I'm just looking, go ahead.
Last year, I know we put off $150,000 for replacing the laptops.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was requested again. Was that kept in your budget recommendation, Brian, or was that removed?
That's in capital.
That's capital
That's still in there.
Yes,
Still in there?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you for remembering that.
Yeah, I remember we spoke about it in depth.
I was
You
asked to push it off another year.
Yeah. Lou, when we put that in capital, will we put it over 6-7 years, the laptops?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They've exceeded their service life by, 2 years already, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Well, we can always stretch them a little bit, but for our end, for the budgetary end, we have to know how long we can capitalize them. in the finance, so.
Understand?
And 7 is max?
The SLE2s in the schools, what are we upping from? How many to how many, Chief?
So right now, sir, we have 5 SLEO 3s in
threes.
our schools. We just hired another one to bring it up to 6. You know, our target number is 12. That's what we originally budgeted for. We're very picky in our selection process. We've had some candidates. They interviewed well. It's just that it's not the candidate that we're particularly looking for Howell Township. So we're moving about it pretty slow. I don't think it's a bad thing. The officers that we have now are doing an excellent job. We're moving them around, you know, on a pretty frequent basis, depending on what's going on. If we see any threats, if there's anything of concern, we start moving them. But we do want to get up to 12. This is a discussion that the manager and I have had for the past few weeks about that. But it's a slow process. We did talk about one of the reasons why, and this was right at the beginning, was the pay. Some of the towns up in North Jersey, I believe one town was paying these SLEO 3s $45 an hour. I'm not even looking at that right now. But what we had to do in order to bring our numbers down to that $300,000 initial startup cost was lower the starting salary from what we told them it was going to be at $25 an hour down to $20.50, just so we can make that $300,000 budget to get the program off and running, with the expectation, and it's been budgeted, that number go back up to $25 an hour. So we brought it down just to get that program up and running with the amount of money that we had, and now it's been up to $25 an hour. So hopefully now, at that 25, we can attract more officers that meet our needs.
And some of our initial startup costs that we spoke about when we first initiated this project, they're out of the way.
Yes.
Some of those initial startup costs.
Yes. You know, we still, you know, the startup costs on our end now is more so as far as just uniforms. That's it. There's a little bit of overtime associated with the training of them, but I added an extra person in my training staff to compensate for that as well. So that number is probably very minimal.
Is it a 10-month program or a 12-month program, Chief?
It's a 10-month program.
It's a 10-month
Yes.
program. So right now, during summer school, we have nobody there. Is that correct?
Well,
Except our regular
yes.
patrol force.
That's correct. Am I right on that? Yeah, in the summertime, it's basically nothing's going on, right? Yeah. So, you know, even though there's events going on at the school, it's most of the time it's PAL summer camps, which we will have either our community service officers attending that, or we'll have the SLEO 3s attending that as a security measure to protect those kids while they're at that school.
Well, there's something I think we should look into too, because there is summer school for a 5.5 week span of time in about 4 of the schools. That's all, just,
Yeah.
I didn't know, but I was in any initial discussions, but then basically it's been between yourself, the manager, and superintendent of schools.
Yeah,
So
more so, they tell us what their needs are, and that's what we budgeted for. They give us full control of, as far as their training and everything else that comes with equipping them, and we give them the full control over the hours, and where they want those officers. So wherever they see a need, where they want those officers, that's where we put them. Sometimes a recommendation comes from us, hey, we're hearing this, this may occur over at this school, and we'll slide some of the 3s over there. But it's working out extremely well. The partnership that we have with the schools is absolutely a model policy. You know, we're very fortunate here. Very fortunate that just everyone gets along extremely well.
If I could, Chief, you say it's working out very well for the first year, and I know in 1 year's time, it's very difficult to assess it fully, but you seem rather pleased. Do you think within the next year or so you'll be able to expand what you're doing, or do you feel that you're just expanding into the other schools, or the actual schools you're in you can expand?
So we're looking to expand it. So right now, we have an officer assigned to each middle school, and then there's sister schools that are attached to those middle
Right.
schools. So those sister schools don't always have an officer at them.
Right.
It's something like part of our security protocol that we don't say when there's an officer there. That way no one can forecast when someone's going to be there or not. But-
Obviously.
But the plan is to fill 7 or 8 full-time positions with 12 part-timers, right? 7?
The original agreement is 7
Yeah.
full-timers,
Yeah.
which equates to 12 part-time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
That was the initial conversations when
Yes.
we sat down a few years ago, and we knew we'd have to walk before we'd run.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But fortunate for us is that I have school officers. I have one that's full-time at the high school, that's compensated through the high school district, and I also have Maureen McBride in the grammar schools. So she provides that educational component full-time, whereas the threes, they are a quasi-security, school, an SRO. When the whole program was developed, it was to make the schools basically a security officer in the schools. Our component that we have here has, part of it is a school resource officer, where they're actually instructing, they're mentoring the kids, because we want those kids to see that officer as the same officer that works the beat. That's why they're in the same uniform. And so it was all designed that way, that nice, kind officer that they see mentoring them, giving them instruction, sitting with them at an assembly or lunch, and providing that security component of the school is that same officer that they're going to meet out on the street. So
It's
to answer-
interesting, because I remember several years ago when they first talked about this at one of the Board of Ed meetings,
Yeah.
there were parents actually concerned that their child might be afraid of a policeman. And I was sort of taken back. I thought, well, who would raise their child to be afraid of a policeman or a
Right.
fireman?
Yeah, and we also incorporated a bunch of other,
Yeah.
just to touch on that. Now we do park and walks where the standard beat officer that's in that sector will park his car at whatever school it is and do a park and walk. He parks, goes in, makes his rounds of the school, shows his face, gets back in his car and patrols, regardless whether or not there's an officer there. It's just another officer at the school. So, not only is that SLEO 3 and that school resource officer in there, now they got the regular beat officer going into those schools, talking with the kids, sitting with them at assembly, playing with them at the playground. So, and again, it's something very unique to our community, and it's absolutely a model that should be followed. But with that comes a cost, and like I've said,
And how may be the model,
yeah.
you know?
I get requests all the time, and I know Captain Starr does it as well, asking for our policies, asking for our budget, asking how we started up. It's pretty common that quite often we get
You'll
those
be
requests.
mentoring every other district in the state,
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully.
yeah, you're right. Thank you for
Thanks.
recognizing that.
Where are we here?
Chief, I got a couple questions.
Sure, sir.
In your specialized line items,
Okay.
first question is funds for narcotic buys. Why do you do that out of your O&E?
I'm sorry, what was that, funds for narcotics buys?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? That's always been the standard as when I got the budget, now, understand that there was no teaching of me, there was no mentoring.
I
This
know.
is- This is where it always has been, so I kept it in there. I don't know where else it could go, so if you have any recommendations for me, I'd be happy to hear it. But,
Lou, have you looked into that?
I-
And do all other departments do it that way? I mean, I'd be curious to know.
I can poll some of my fellow Monmouth County finance officers to see where they, see where that's budgeted. It hasn't been something that I've looked at before, but that doesn't mean that I can't research it going forward.
I like to research that because I don't think it needs to be an O&E. But I could be wrong, but speaking to others, I don't think it needs to be. The other question I have is on building modification and enhancements, $10,000? Why would we put that in his O&E and not somewhere like in capital or, I'm not even sure what it's for.
So I did request about $60,000 in security upgrades in the capital. This is one thing. this is one thing that could actually be eliminated. If you're looking to take a little bit more money off, that can. That was to install a few different walls internally within our police department. We have basically outgrown our space, and like I said, we have a mental health coordinator that's sharing a small office with traffic safety and EMS. So I was going to take one of my larger briefing areas and split it into 2 additional areas and put up some extra walls. So that was going to cover the costs on that, and do an extra interview room also, when someone comes in out of the public, they're not walking throughout our entire headquarters. They go right into an interview room.
I have no issue with the work.
Yeah.
I have an issue with coming in O&E. I think it should be put into his capital with his other capital requests. And the last one I have, crowd riot control.
That's out.
That was taken
That
out.
was taken out.
I'm still working on the old sheet.
Chief, I had talked to the manager on a few different occasions, and I've done a little homework on the outside. I'm very concerned about what's going on with the drug problem all over the United States, but especially here at home. And I'm very interested in exploring, if it's with your support, a drug court here in Howell Township. I think the crime suppression unit has done not a good job. They've done a great job. And I've been a strong supporter of that since day one. And I just think we need to attack this drug epidemic that's going on from every possible angle we can. So I would be strongly in favor, after doing some research, if it was with your support, of looking into doing that here in Howell Township. I've spoken to the manager about it some, I've spoken to a couple of council members. I wouldn't know where to begin to start it, or what we would need to do. But I do have a little bit of insight into some of the effectiveness of it from some other angles, and I would like to see that implemented here in Howell Township, if at all possible. Any thoughts back from you on that?
Absolutely, and this is something that we actually discussed not too long ago. I know that the manager has had conversations with our municipal court judge about establishing that and somehow tying in the alliance into it as well. I don't want to speak out of place here with his conversation, but it's something that we can absolutely do. I know that Judge Clark is on board with it. I know that there are some restrictions from basically, I don't want to say the administrative office of the courts, but there is some restrictions that we may have to work around. But she is the person that should be spoken to, because she's passionate about starting it. You understand the way that we work here. We're very innovative when it comes to recovery and addiction services. So I'm on board with it 100%, and I think it's a great idea.
I do understand that she's the one who would have to spearhead that. But, Chief, I think anything that has to do with enforcement or drug issues and how, if the chief of police isn't totally supportive of it.
Yep, you have my 100% support behind it.
I've been fighting a long time from some other angles, trying to help as many people as I possibly can, and I go to far too many funerals.
I
But,
agree.
there's some good victories in there, too.
Yep.
So, I accept defeats with the victories. And I'm glad to hear that. I would like to take it a step further, sir, if we could have some meetings with the judge about that, and maybe see about moving in that direction.
Okay, that is already in progress. I've met with her just this past week to discuss it. The chief is accurate. For us to establish a drug court, it's got to be recognized by the administrative office of the courts. It's quite a lengthy process. The judge feels confident we can take steps towards getting that done before we're even approved to do so. The chief is definitely on board, which is reflective of the number of drug arrests that are coming out of the police department and being presented to the court. That'll allow her some other alternatives for sentencing to ensure counseling, that kind of thing. But that already is in the works. We discussed different funding opportunities such as grants. She's going to research some federal grants. I had suggested some other ideas, but there will be follow-up meetings with that.
And if there needs to be a liaison for the governing body, I'd be glad to be involved with that, if you all saw it in your hearts to let me. I have a strong interest. Thank you, Chief.
And just to touch on that, it really starts with legislation, because there's so many gaps in the current laws that allow the problem to not be dealt with properly. So Assemblywoman Damaso, we all know Serena, her and I have had conversations about this. The Overdose Prevention Act, where it basically provides immunity to somebody who reports somebody who's under the influence, or that person calls themselves from possession charges. Now, the problem that we face here in Howell, and this is the reason why we started our whole intervention with our recovery coaches and the crisis interventionists, is that this just happened not too long ago. It happened about 2 weeks ago. Was that we go to a scene of an overdose. We could be pumping on that person's chest, hitting them up with multiple doses of Narcan, only to have them come back, speak just like we're speaking right here, sign in RMA, refusing medical assistance, and then we walk away. Well, what happens is that puts that person right into immediate withdrawal. Now they're craving a drug even more. So what do? They go out and they buy it, they inject themselves, and we're seeing people die or overdose again. We responded to the same residents twice in one night. Fortunately, the second time the person went to the hospital. So there is a gap there where we should be able to say, okay, yeah, your charges are waived, basically, if you get help. If you don't get help, if you don't go to the hospital, see a crisis interventionist or a recovery coach, then now obviously the charges do apply. We're not arresting our way out of the situation. We see how that worked back in the 80s and the 90s. It's just not working. You have to look at a different perspective now. And it's not your junkie that's getting high. It's your everyday person. It's your 15-year-old. It's your 60-year-old. It's your 70-year-old. There's absolutely, it doesn't discriminate. So we definitely have to look at different ways to solve this. We've taken those steps, those proactive steps here. In fact, we're going to a CFC gala where we're around and we're sitting at the same table with people in recovery. It's just everyday people, but the stigma is attached to them. We don't see that here in our police department. So I'll be proud to have that and be at the forefront of anything else that we can do, basically to change, this whole problem.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, is the accreditation fee every year?
It
I
is,
know
sir.
you just received it, so
Yeah,
it's every year?
Yeah, it's every year. And what that encompasses is that they give us updates. It's almost basically a certification that you need to maintain. I know it's a lot of money. There's some of it that we already knocked out of there, which I said I can use my forfeiture money to take a hold of. Brian he was in a tough spot. He absolutely consulted with me on a lot of these things, and either your needs or your wants, and there's other things that I can provide funding for through alternate means, just like vehicles. I pulled $30,000 out of my forfeiture fund to buy one of our undercover vehicles. So, that's the commitment that I have as a chief, to take some of that responsibility, whereas I don't think you guys should be buying everything. I'll take some expense as well. So, accreditation, that's absolutely something that I believe nowadays in law enforcement. And Deputy Mayor, I know you understand that.
I do. What number is that final? Because I'm working on the old sheet. Is it still?
10 grand.
It's still, so that's number's the same?
That we cut,
That you cut, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So the final number is 10?
Yeah, I only have the total amount here.
All right, then I'm working on the right sheet. And the only other one I have is the defibrillators. So you're asking for 10. Are all those police officers are going to be EMTDs and?
They all are first responders. You only have to be a first responder to use a defibrillator. They're all in our cars. All the officers have to sign them out, and the Narcan's still attached to them. Is that how we do it? Yeah. So the Narcan is attached right to the defibrillators. So they grab that pack with them on every shift. You will not find, and I proudly say this, and again, you're responsible for this, you will not find a police department that's more well-trained and more well-equipped than we are here in Howell Township. And again, it's a credit to to my budget that I'm able to do that. I thank you for that.
So if we can go to capital for a second?
Sure. Yep.
I don't remember the number, but how many cars did we replace last year?
8, I believe.
We got 8 cars last year. And the problem with that, Mayor, is that we were a little late on the ordering of the cars, on the approval of the funds through the MCIA. We don't even have those cars yet. They won't even be on the road for at least 3 more months? About 3 more months. They haven't
Why
even
is
come
that
in.
such a long time?
Because the funds didn't get approved till September, or October. And then it
By
takes...
us?
Well, the capital,
Oh, by the time we go through MCIA and they
Yes.
do their bonding, the whole ball of
Yes.
wax, it
Yeah.
comes back around the whole circle.
yeah, so
Is that 3 months with all of the equipment put in? Ready to
that's on the
ready to
road
go?
in 3 months. So we're now a year behind. And you'll see in my capital request this year, I asked for 15 cars because now we're a year behind. Now, we could just do that, that those 9 or 10 cars again this year and just push that number off to next year because we're a year behind. But we're always going to be a year behind now if we don't catch up somehow. So I know I provided you a pretty detailed report last year on our car. So now some of those cars that we were going to remove from service last year are still now in service. So just the way that we work here is that once those cars are removed from the patrol division, they're given to the detective bureau to use. We don't buy our detective bureau new cars. So now we're getting to the point that even those cars that are now in service are getting well over $100,000 and 100,000 miles, and that's a standard used nationwide for police cars. When you look at 100,000 miles, it's a standard that our public works uses, and it's a standard that's basically set in the industry. And we have several cars that are well over 100,000. One that's approaching 200,000. So it's we're trying to squeeze every bit of use out of these cars.
We don't have MCIA this year, Chief, so so it would be a little bit quicker, the funding. Because it's only every other year that
So
we
you're
go through
saying
the
you do
improvement
half
authority.
this year and then push that other half off to next year?
I'm just saying,
I don't know why we're not sticking to the system that we placed about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, I think it's
MC,
long,
maybe longer. Time flies.
right?
Yeah. To me, this is a big hit.
It is.
Without doing an MCI,
I understand.
so.
and interest rates are going up, as we all know. I mean, people are complaining to us about how the taxes are going up. Thank God we bonded for as much, and we did as much as we did while interest rates are low. Interest rates are almost 2% higher than they were 2 years ago. So doing all the things we did with the roads, buying all the vehicles we bought, and we still have a lot of money out there that's still in a band that hasn't been done yet. I mean, we have to be very cognizant. We have just immediate costs going up this year without us spending money is over $2 million.
Right. I understand. Now, again, if that was only the number to catch up because since we're a year behind. Now, can I work with 8 cars? Yes, that would be fine. But again, we're going to be a year behind next year. We're always going to be that year behind. So some of those cars now are not going to be able to be used at all. So that's the reason why I put 15 in there. I have 3 detectives sharing 1 car. My training unit has 1 car. So if one person's down at the range or out at a training class, they're trying to, grab a car from somewhere else. In fact, we just had a discussion this morning, myself and Captain Starro, about repurposing another car to try to put back into patrol, into the fleet to be used. So, again, I understand the position that you're in. I get it. If you need anything detailed more on that, Patrolman Levine has all the numbers, has the amount of miles, he has everything on there.
I just want to be clear, so the replacement vehicles, as I see it, is $675,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's for 15 cars. We have the breakdown of the cost of the car as far as the equipment. We even considered repurposing some equipment that we have, but then some of the equipment that we have is getting outdated, so we need to replace that. So it's it's tough.
Some of the outdated stuff probably wouldn't even fit anyway.
That's-
Everything's changed.
That's true, but if I know a set number that I have every year, it would make planning for it a lot easier. So if we knew that I was getting 8 cars every single year, that would make planning a lot easier. I understand the MCIA funding, I get it, but
We can plan all that, but we can't promise you ahead. We don't know what next year's council or the council after that or the council after that is going to do.
I get it, Councilwoman, but we need the cars to respond to
I
those
know, but
calls.
I'm just saying, how can you, you know?
Yeah, I get
We
it.
can say you can count on it, but
Yeah,
It's a good plan to plan, I agree.
yeah, it's tough.
Listen, you don't know if there's gonna be accidents. Totally take a car off the,
Well, that's part of it.
yeah,
So
you don't know.
we lost 3 cars last year that we never got replaced. We have one that's about to be taken off the line that only has, how much does a white Charger have on it? How many miles? Yeah, so 56,000 miles on this one. It looks
One you
perfect,
lost?
but the whole body's rotting out from underneath it. So even though it's pursuit
That's
rated,
what happens.
would I allow one of my officers to use it in pursuit? Absolutely not. So just like a car with over 100,000 miles, do I want him to responding to an officer down or a CPR or a childbirth or something, an accident, in that car with that many miles? Now, our Public Works does a fantastic job taking care of the cars, but they only could do so much.
you can ask Harvey, and I'm sure he remembers. But when we went on the first council in 1992,
Before the floods.
after a lot of floods, there wasn't one whole fender in the whole fleet. They were all rusted all the way around the wheels.
I just met with him last night to get some pointers.
How is he?
He's okay.
He's hanging in.
Yeah, he's hanging in there.
I did see him a few weeks ago.
Just so we're on the same page, Councilwoman Donald just asked me, and 45,000 is all in, totally equipped, new computers, everything in the car, correct?
Dave, can you come up here and address that? Because I just went over this with Dave. He goes, Chief, that's a little low, but I'm like, I'm not asking for a penny more, so we're going to make it work with this much money. So he's going to go over basically the cost of a car, and this is the standard Ford Explorer. This is not the Tahoe. I got 3 Tahoes last year. That was as a result of the amount of equipment that these guys are carrying now. The Explorers are tight. So
How much more is a Tahoe than an Explorer?
$10,000 more.
$10,000 more.
But the problem with that is that you can't repurpose some of the equipment from the previous car that you take out of. So if we remove an Explorer out of the fleet, we can't take that cage and everything else that was in it and put it in put it in a Tahoe. You can't do it. So now all that money now is kind of just sitting there.
What vehicles are we using for the K-9?
Explorers.
Okay.
Explorers, yeah. But the good thing about the K-9 car is that they're going to last, they're going to last 8 years. So those guys will have those cars for quite some
Soon we're
time.
going to have the dogs pull the cars, so we're going to get about 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
As long as they're mean looking.
And after the K-9 uses it for eight years, nobody wants to use that car. I can tell you that. No.
I'm gonna leave that alone or I'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
Can you
So
just
if-
run through some of that
Yeah,
stuff
so if you
in
could just
the
go
car?
over some of the costs on each of those.
Sure, so when we build a Ford Explorer, the car costs roughly about $25,000 just to purchase the vehicle.
Ford Explorer's 25,000?
On
Correct.
state contract, correct.
You gotta speak a little bit closer to that
I'm sorry.
center thing.
Okay, so the Ford Explorer is about $25,000, depending on the options as well. There's different options for them, but that's a rough estimate. When we begin building the vehicle, you have lighting equipment, emergency equipment such as the siren, lights, consoles for the computers, radios, cages, bars for the windows so that they don't get kicked out, so we can protect that investment. And when all is said and done with that, the upfitter, it costs about $12,000 to $15,000 depending on the options. Not including the radios, the watch guard equipment, the video equipment. So a radio for a car is about $8,000. The watch guard equipment is about $7,000. So that's another $15,000 right there. You're looking at close to $50,000 for a Ford Explorer. Now, the chief, like he mentioned earlier, we repurpose. We're very thrifty when it comes to taking other vehicles and I personally get in those vehicles and take whatever equipment that we can reuse out, and then we repurpose that. Our upfitter is very good about taking that equipment and working with us to actually reuse it, repurpose it, and make it work for our new vehicles. So we do cut some of the money out there. But like the chief also pointed out, we get to a point where we've pretty much exhausted the equipment that we can pull out and reuse. And then when we have a new vehicle that we don't have equipment to put back into, we would have to incur the cost of purchasing the extra equipment, which is where we have that pitfall.
These new laptops we're asking for have nothing to do with the equipment that goes in the cars, correct?
No.
Okay.
Correct. And again, the watch guard equipment, typically what happens is if we were to get, say, this time we have 8 vehicles, and we need 8 MVRs to put in them, the video systems. I can then take cars that we are going to pull out of patrol, take the equipment out of that, and repurpose it for that vehicle until that equipment is no longer good. And again, we're hitting the point where that equipment is coming to a point where some of it is no longer good.
Do you find out that if you pull the equipment out and put it into another car, as opposed to putting in new equipment, in 2 or 3 years, is that equipment now defunct and you do have to buy new equipment to replace it?
Well, the good thing is that, at least with the camera equipment, which is one of the most expensive components in the vehicle, for a standalone system by itself, the chief has a great fleet manager that maintains that equipment, so there's less wear on it. He can take it out very good.
Can you tell he's on the sergeant's list?
Nothing like sharing the praise, right?
Hard worker, are you?
No, but in all honesty, the equipment, the good part about it is that I have built some pretty good relationships with the camera company, and I've been working with them, so they've been giving me some of their training that they normally wouldn't give, so that I know how to make these repairs without having to pay for them. Additionally, we noticed that the cameras are very durable, so they last a pretty good amount of time. They told us that we would get about 5 years out of them, we're pretty much approaching that 5-year mark, and most of the equipment is actually in pretty good shape for that 5-year period. I estimate that we could probably get another year out of it.
We have 250,000 into WatchGuard digital video recorders. Is that
Correct.
all for the cars?
I've been working with WatchGuard for the cars, but also with that package. And again, the relationships that I've built with them, they were able to work in additional body cameras with those. So for those 30 systems, or 31 systems, for every one we get for a car, they're going to throw in also with that package a body camera. So we would not have to do a separate order for additional body cameras. Wi-Fi body cameras, they actually sync up with the cars. They would be an additional $1,000 a camera. And that's not including any hardware support on it or software support as well. Those are all additions to it.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Chief, I see we asked for this $175,000 Ford F-450 frontline emergency response unit.
All right, so let me get into that, because I know it's not too popular up there with you guys. All right, so I just want to...
I just want you to explain it again,
I
Chief.
just want to talk to you about this again, because this will take the place of 3 cars. This is basically a frontline vehicle that will be used out in patrol. I just want to pass this around. This was put out to you guys last year. So Sergeant Mazzio put together this whole spreadsheet. And basically what this is, Tom's River has one just as similar as we do. It is basically a first response vehicle to handle any type of critical incident where we need to have equipment on scene very quickly. We can't, especially entry equipment, rescue equipment that we need to bring to the scene of an active shooter, or something where there's a ballistic threat where we can't bring in the first aid or the fire department into the scene to let us gain entry into a structure. Now, there was a little bit of, I don't want to say drama behind this over the past, last year when this was originally proposed. This was by no means taking away any type of services as it was portrayed to the police, to the fire department or EMS. We're not doing extrication. This is not New York City where the ESU does high-rise rescue, elevator rescue, cutting people out of cars. No, this was basically a vehicle that's on the road that's able to immediately respond to the scene of emergency where we cannot use or cannot wait for fire or EMS to come in. You'll see some equipment that would be on this truck, long rifles, extra ammunition, ladders, crowd control devices, shields, thermal imaging and night vision, Animal snares, breaching and forcible entry equipment, basically a basket to get a critically injured officer or civilian out of a threat area, and also some Howell tools, which are the cutters and the spreaders. We can't bring the fire department or emergency services into a hot zone and where they're not protected, they're not trained, they're not armed. So basically, it's our job to do that. Now, the way that I looked at it is this vehicle will be on the road pretty much, I don't want to say 24 hours a day, but a majority of the day. Yes, it looks a lot, but it basically take the place of 3 cars. So I know that it's a little tough right now, the way things are. I just wanted to put that out there, that if I'll be willing to go down 3 or 4 cars in order to get this vehicle out on the road, because it's
3 or
that.
4 from, 3 or 4 from 8, so that you'd only get 4
No,
or
from
5.
No, 15. Let's not get carried away there. All right?
But if you follow the procedures,
First,
proceedings
Or like I
tonight,
said, if it's something that next year we can maybe explore when MCIA funding is available, we can do that again. I just wanted to put that out there, that way there's no misnomers, there's nothing, you actually understand the value behind a truck like this that is able to take the place of patrol cars, because it will be assigned to a sector out there, just like a patrol car would, and it would last considerably longer. That's the reason why we got away from that van-style ambulance, and we went more with the Type 1, the diesel, the larger truck, because that truck is going to last a hell of a lot longer than those small box ambulances that we had, and you could just basically take the box off of it, replace a new chassis under it, and it's still good to go. So yeah, you have to spend a little bit of money up front, but it's going to last you considerably a long time. Just the business model that I look at when and obviously it's a very good asset to have within the police department. There are a few towns that do have it, Toms River being the closest one, that has a truck like this on the road quite often.
So you already almost answered one of my questions. One was, how long does this vehicle last? What's the life of the vehicle? 2, have you to date encountered a time that you needed this vehicle and you didn't have it?
Well, I'm gonna call Bernie. I'm gonna call Bernie up on that. I'm gonna let him discuss a little bit more about that. It's almost like you don't want to come across that situation. and
Understood,
not
but
have it, right?
understood.
And go, now we can justify getting it because we actually had it. And I just want to give you a little background. He can tell you without revealing too much, but we've taken some very proactive measures within our police department to provide those officers with a lot of the tools that they need in order to gain entry into a fortified structure, to the point that we have basically some thermal capabilities now, high heat, that we can breach some metal areas and stuff like that. So we are at the forefront of that behind the scenes. Those are things that we did out of some forfeiture money that I had. But having a vehicle like this with the personnel on scene, within minutes, and they always say, minutes do matter in a critical incident. So I'll just let him expand upon the tactical part of that a little bit more.
A lot of the equipment we looked at, we basically looked at current trends, things going on around the country, around the nation, and we try to pre-plan for all those events. Now, obviously, in a normal patrol car, a lot of that equipment we can't fit. Being in a vehicle like this with immediate access to officers on the road that have been trained in it, like the chief said, we're saving tons of time. Now, there are county assets that take well over an hour to get to the scene. This truck could be on the scene in minutes, where we have those assets assigned to us. And like the chief said, without getting into specifics, there's a lot of things out there that we have pre-planned for, that we know that if we have this equipment, will be immediate access to us. We'll be able to respond a lot better than we would currently.
So understand, and I don't want to beat this to death, but when we had the MRAP, the large armored vehicle, now we basically got that for less than $20,000. I have a fully armored $1 million vehicle readily accessible to our officers in the time that we may need it for a ballistic threat or for any type of high water rescue. Now, the only ballistic protection that we have is with a small Bearcat, which is it's a smaller size van that is part of the county SWAT team, which we're a part of, but that's housed somewhere else in the county. So an officer would have to, in a critical incident where you have a ballistic threat, would have to drive to this location in the county, pick it up, and bring it back to wherever the situation was. So obviously, that takes a considerable amount of time. Now we have a ballistic threat, any type of critical incident in town. We have several officers that are already trained to take that armored asset now from our police department and deliver it right to the scene, and be able to either pull down civilians out, or provide a ballistic protection for anybody else from a threat. So it's just, we're always forward thinking. Not only that, is that we're constantly looking at the military surplus in order to protect our residents even more. I just ordered up using forfeiture money for the shipping costs to bring in vehicle barricades in order to protect our residents and our attendees a little bit more from some of the public events that we have. And it even includes traffic light, doesn't it include traffic light or some kind of lighting system?
Not that one. The
Okay.
one that we're trying to get those.
Right, and now we're looking at one that includes a portable traffic light that we can use almost to set up a quasi-checkpoint into an area like either Howell Day or somewhere else. So we're always looking at different ways that we can handle a critical incident should it happen. Not waiting for it to happen and then scrambling and trying to find the assets that we need, or not being able to, and that's what we always talk about. We want to be able to fully be able to protect our citizens and our residents and whoever else with what we have here in the police department, and not relying on anybody else to come in and help us. Now, certain things, obviously, you still need that. I mean, large amount of personnel, helicopter assets, stuff like that, you need to rely on the state police for. But something like this would basically, strengthen our capabilities, providing, obviously the safeguard our citizens. So, again, I understand it's a heavy hit, but when you look at it, if we can take it off the vehicle end, I can maybe find some grant money. There's some grant money around. I can use
Yeah, we
the
spoke
forfeiture
about that
money.
last year, you had a little grant money.
Yeah.
You've been working on this pitch, chief. A lot came a long way from last year.
Well,
How much grant money? What did you be able to find?
well, put it this way.
Be careful.
Yeah, I just gotta watch this because, it depends on, I can say this, it depends on, a few things. There's Homeland Security grants available to me through the Monmouth County Working Group. I can get some money, from them. Also, and again, I don't wanna bite my nose off to spite my face, but, there's also some Safe Corridor grant funding in the future, not so much this year, in the future that we could tie into it. So there is some possibility of some.
That safe corridor, what's that typical grant look like? How much?
This year we got $50,000.
Was that the bikes?
Actually, a little more than that, right? 56,000?
Yes.
Was that the bikes, chief?
That was last year,
That was, okay.
yeah.
Is that the typical grant out there, about 50, 60?
It was back and forth.
We actually get a little bit more because we have such a stretch. We have 32 miles of enforceable highway. So 8 miles
Okay.
with 2 lanes in each all the way down.
Right.
So that's the way they look at it. In a Safe Corridor grant for those towns, we're the largest collector of the grant money in there. We also provide a lot of enforcement on that Route 9 corridor as
Right.
well.
Got it.
So I just ask you to consider that, and again, I understand the position that you guys are in. There's ways that I was trying to find the funding for this. Again, if it's replacing a patrol car and it's going to last 10 years, which I think it will, then that does take the place of a few patrol cars. So, just food for thought.
Can we go back?
You don't want to, there's a big guy here, you don't want to make him mad.
So this year, you're asking for 10 police officers?
That's not happening. That's not happening. So I think the number that we agreed upon was 2.
Yes, we were discussing 2 officers, but then in subsequent conversations, the chief had said he would go for 1 officer if we could put the balance towards the second officer towards his part-time staff, special officers, things like that.
The SLE 3s or 2s?
Would be 2s as well as some,
2s as part, and as well as.
Well, the 3s is a separate agreement.
yeah, that's
So
separate.
it's not 3s.
That has nothing to do with-
It's my class 2s who are actually supplementing the officers on the road. So I'll just paint this picture for you. So if there is a prisoner transport, so if Newark PD has has an arrest on our warrant, it's a 2-officer response. Normally, we would send 2 officers, either on day shift or one holding over holding over on day shift and one on the evening squad, sometimes two on overtime, sometimes two not on overtime, up there to pick this prisoner up. Now we're using our Class 2s at $20 an hour to go up there and do that. So they are bringing down, even though it looks like that line item has increased for the part-timers, they're actually bringing down my overtime.
Your overtime.
Yeah, so it all balances out. And plus, excuse me, they're providing that service, the backup support on the road as well. They're providing our court security. You'll see them more, at some of our functions. They basically get treated, and it's the model that I implemented, they get treated just like they're one of our patrolmen. And those are the two that I selected from those SLEO 2s to become full-time sworn police officers.
And I know if we end up having a drug court, it's going to take extra
Yes.
personnel.
Yes.
Things like that don't happen without extra personnel.
So I
That's the way it
was
is.
willing to sacrifice one police officer and take those funds and disperse them along my part-time staff.
How many how many officers could you get with one? You do one regular officer and the rest part-time? How many is that?
Well, it depends. I mean,
That would be for hours, right? Wouldn't it be for?
This is
it would
hours
go for
only.
hours,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
And this has nothing to do with the threes, which are in the school,
No,
which is a
completely-
separate agreement
completely separate.
altogether.
It's part-time
We're,
employment within the police
we're on
department.
the same page there. That was
20,
the agreement we all struck when we first started this 3 years ago.
Let me just touch on manpower. I just want to touch on that because you have to understand where we're at right now. So we're slowly creeping our way back up, and I appreciate that. I want to get a traffic safety unit back in place. Right now, I basically have 2 officers, but they're administrative. At times, they go out there and do enforcement. That's the reason why I kind of pushed off some of the responsibilities onto the regular patrol guys and girls, out there on the road, looking at that discretionary patrol time when they have extra free time to go out there and hit those hot spots. But I would like reestablish our traffic safety unit. So with this 1 or 2 officers that I was slated to get, that would put either 1 or 2 officers back in traffic safety to do enforcement, to actually do enforcement and education and not be so administrative. Again, trying to rebuild back up that program.
is that the
So-
intent then of the one officer?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
traffic's, okay.
So the lowest that we ever were, the highest we ever were in our police department was 99 in 2009. The lowest we ever went after that was in 2014. We were at 72 officers. Tough. So we're
And
now
today?
We're back up to 87 today. Now, I understand Mr. Walsh always has a little bit of concern when I mention what our authorized strength is by ordinance. It's 111 police officers by ordinance. That was a number that was reached through a state police study years ago. Now, do we need 111 police officers? Believe me, I would love it, but there's no need. We were very comfortable at 99 police officers. We had a traffic safety unit. We had all of our units were in place. What I plan on doing is backfilling patrol in order to reestablish a buffer of officers, so when one calls out, there's not an automatic overtime. So that's going to further decrease my overtime. I enacted a time-off policy that just got implemented about a week or 2 ago in collaboration with the union that will further reduce my overtime and control some of those overtime costs that I have within my police department. That's never been done before. So just working with the unions, both of the unions, it took about a month to develop this policy, going back and forth, doing several revisions, talking to my staff. We came up with this policy that we've never had in our police department that gives me some control over some of these, some of the time and some of the manpower and some of those issues. So 1 officer is not going to make a difference. 2 officers will start making a difference. 3, when I can start building my numbers back up. Every single day, these officers out there on the road are working at minimum manning levels. Minimum manning levels. So as soon as someone calls out sick, boom, it's overtime. Because we have to maintain a certain minimum of officers out there on the road in order to properly do the job. So the more I replace those officers back in patrol, I actually have a graph here that shows you where I would like these officers to go. Obviously, this is based upon 10 officers in the future, working our way back up, and not 10 officers immediately now. So if anybody would like to see that graph, I'll pass this around.
I would.
You actually can see where we are at now and where officers would be assigned to.
Yeah.
We can go back. Unless you want to take over for me.
No, it's good.
Thank you.
You did.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So you'll see that there's several officers have been added to traffic safety. Obviously, that is if I get the amount of officers, but after I assign either one or two more officers to traffic, just like I keep saying, we have that drug problem, we have that traffic problem. I already have a drug unit, I need my traffic unit back. Even if I don't get that, I can start backfilling those officers back into patrol to give that buffer back. So when someone does call out sick, someone calls an emergency personnel day, there's not automatic overtime, automatic 5 hours of overtime generated.
How many level 2 officers do you currently have?
10. With the recommendation to hire 2 of those Class 2s, so obviously I would have to replace those 2 officers. Doesn't really cost too much other than the equipment and the uniforms to outfit it. But what's good about bringing over the Class 2 into a regular sworn, everything's already been paid for as 2s. All their training, they get the same training as a standard police officer, so they go from a Class 2, you just take the patch off, throw a new patch on, and now they're a sworn police officer. That's it. There's no training involved in it, so it's immediate, I don't want to say gratification, but it's just, there's immediate results as, there's no training program for it, there's no policy development, there's nothing. It's just right on the road. So it's a good program. We use it as a mentoring program. We use it almost like a recruiting program to give them, basically, you're auditioning for the next police officer job. So it's worked out. The 2 programs worked out very well. Very happy with that.
So we have 10 Class 2s presently.
Correct?
And do you find relief with the Class 2s in terms of overtime?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, because now I'm not paying an officer overtime to handle court. I'm not paying an officer overtime to go up, pick up a prisoner. So the way our 2s work is that they're out there supplementing patrol when there's an arrest. To get that officer back out on the street as quickly as possible, the Class 2 processes that prisoner.
Okay.
So, and it's also given that Class 2 experience about how to handle prisoners. So it's a learning lesson as well. So yes, I'm going to be in talks with the union. Right now, you cannot use a Class 2 to replace a police officer. So say my minimum manning levels are say 8, and one calls out sick and brings me down to 7, I can't replace that officer with a Class 2. But you can, as long as the union can agree to it. So there's some certain things that I have in place that is not going to completely eliminate the overtime, but add another layer of protection to the overtime. So just certain things, just thinking out of the box, getting out of the typical way things have always been done and just trying to be innovative and working with the unions.
Have I understood you correctly? So if you can work it out with the union, then these Class 2s can in fact do this
Yes.
position?
Yes.
So it's a matter of you and the union coming to whatever terms are
Right.
necessary to
So-
fulfill this?
So you understand, so what I'm looking to do is, anytime an officer will get involuntarily forced to stay over, they have the option in replacing themselves with a Class 2. That way the officer is not forced. So I wouldn't normally, nor would the case law allow me to do it, automatically backfill that position with a Class 2. Can't do that. There's actually laws that prevent me from doing that.
So if the union agrees, just follow me on this one, the union agrees and says, yeah, yes, chief, we'll do that. Who makes the determination that in fact it's a Class 2 that's going to step over and do this?
It would be me, since I'm in charge of operations of the police department.
Because obviously, if it weren't you making the decision, we may not see that cost savings. Because these would be brand-new people, pretty much, on the force, correct?
Which ones?
The Class 2s, as they're
Class 2s?
coming up, they're actually taking overtime that a senior officer would have put in for. Is that correct?
They wouldn't be getting the overtime, they would be getting their
Well,
hourly rate, they were getting the $20.
No, I'm
an
saying
hour.
they would get the hourly rate, but the officer, the sworn officer, would have.
He's not
Yeah.
getting the overtime. And that'll be an issue with the union, there's no doubt about it, and I agree with that.
And I
But
think that's probably going to be some issue for you. Good luck.
Well, time off policy was going to be an issue too, we worked that out. Same with when I first came in with the overtime. That was a hurdle right there. But we got over, they understand it. The officers, they really do understand it. The union has a job to do as well.
I
They
understand,
could be,
sure.
they could be challenging. You guys.
Nah.
Everybody has a position, I understand, and
Yeah,
much easier when we work as one.
I agree.
I think everybody understands it's a new day,
They do. They absolutely do.
okay? And around the corner is a recession.
Yep.
We don't know whether it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. There's a recession coming. Welcome to, they come. There's a recovery, there's a recession. When your expenses are in place and that recession comes, where does the revenue come from to pay all those costs that are already in place? It's not an easy task. I mean, I never felt good about going from 99 to 72, but I also woke up one day in March and Governor Christie cut me $2.8 million. And where was I going to get it from? I mean, there was...
Fortunately, we're creeping back.
Well, you know what, we've creeped back, and I also know that that's what caused a lot of the overtime, too. Besides some real bad storms, when we were short manpower, who was gonna... You guys were working a lot of overtime because there wasn't enough manpower to handle the hours that were needed. We had the floods, we had the superstorm, we had the ice storm, where we had no power for 5, 6 days. We had a lot of tough weather conditions, and you guys are working, I think a lot of you are working 16-hour days every day.
Yeah.
Okay? And you've done a real good job, too, with knocking the overtime. I know everybody's cooperating together.
They really are.
Chief,
So-
I'm sorry.
Mayor.
So we're going on overtime for this year at 750,000?
Correct.
And one other question I have is on the buyback, do you anticipate any buyback this year,
Sick time buyback?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
more than what you got last year?
It probably will be equivalent to what I got last year.
Okay.
But, and I know there was a percentage increase in my salary and wages. I understand that. But I'm going to try to make it up to you on the back end on the overtime, like I said, with some of these control costs in there, to try to make up for that difference. I'm going to do my best, I promise you that. I mean, obviously, I've already shown that. I can't guarantee, because you don't know what could happen. I mean,
Of
you have one
course.
critical incident, and that could just wipe out your overtime budget, you know that. But absent any of those, I'm going to do my best to control those costs. That way you almost see, basically, it become flat. Instead of that 6% increase or whatever it may be, that it's actually, hopefully, becomes balanced.
They happen, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
You know, what does everybody want when it really hits the fan? We want a police presence all around us, making sure everybody's safe. We want emergency services there.
And just to answer, I checked with two of my colleagues at the police departments, the same size as mine. Both of them are line items in the budget and reference to the buy money.
What was that, chief?
The line item for the buy. But it could go into your special trust. Can it?
I don't know if you can make a deposit into there. That's,
It's just something to explore.
yeah.
When you have, and rightfully so, budget's going up almost $1 million, you want to look at every possible way. I'm not saying that you don't need it, but I have a different philosophy, Wherever you can reduce your O&E, I think you should. And, the money's going to be spent anyway, but I never thought I'd see the day when overtime would be cheaper than hiring, and that's where we're at today. So
Listen,
Well, it's a healthcare cost, I mean.
yeah, we
I'm
know
not,
that.
I know the reasons why, healthcare and pensions and everything else, that's an amazing thing. But I also fear when you keep going up almost $1 million in budgets, we're going to cost factor out police departments. I hope I'm wrong, but in this state, we're going to see things that are not good. And they're all noble causes, Chief, but I always say that it's all about public perception, and if the people feel safe, they're not going to want taxes to go up to justify these costs. That's my opinion, but I think as much as you can move out of your O&E, we talked about vehicles last year and doing things a little differently, is helpful.
You mean to push what, $10,000 to be put into my,
No, just in general,
people that employ other people understand. But we look at the costs that are going up that we have zero control over. I mean, our debt service is 1.2 million. There's a cost to buying the trucks, buying the cars, and fixing the roads. Our pension bill this year is 300,000 more. 300,000 in pension costs. Didn't add nobody, didn't even pay for a phone call. Our social security tax increase was $163,000. I mean, we have 2.2 million the non-discretionary expenses going up this year. And that has nothing to do with some of the increases with salaries, or with extra manpower. So it's a thin line. I don't have a hard time with some things that were said, other things, I'm not gonna vote for, but that's me. You'll know where I stand. I'll say this, my vote will be yes, this, my vote will be no.
Do we have any other questions for Chief?
No, I think we just have to come up with numbers for his vehicles.
Well, there's
Well-
only one.
Agreed to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's the most bang for his buck.
I would agree.
What's that?
The
higher.
one higher and
Rest
then,
of the money in
right.
phase twos.
I just ask you this, just to talk about the new hires. There's a possibility of a fewer retirements this year. So-
Of what?
Retirement.
Oh, retirement. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There's a possibility I may have 2 officers going maybe before the summertime. So what I ask you is, since both of those are going to be top-level patrol officers making top salary, is to make the consideration of 2 for 1. So for every 1 that retires, just give me 2 back in place of that. That way, there's not too much a hit on the budget. You're talking about an officer that's making top salary, plus obviously the benefit package being replaced by 2 officers for considerably less money.
But we do know, Chief, a new officer is costing 80 to 90,
I agree.
okay? I'm not against 2 new officers, because I think it'll cut back some on the overtime. I mean, that's just me.
I think it's a good
He's
idea.
asking for one with the Class 2s, right?
But he is gonna have a retirement, if we had it in place, it would
But the
cut back
funding will
on the
be there
overtime.
so that when
Right.
they retire, then that's a decision a governing body can make at that time.
Okay. Hey, listen, I have no problem with the Class 2s, no problem with the Class 3s, and I would vote for 2 officers. I'm not
Two
gonna
for- two
vote for
for
a
one.
$175,000 truck.
Right? The 2 for 1.
I would do the 2 for
I
1,
would
no
agree.
problem.
I would agree.
I mean, I'm not gonna vote for the $175,000 truck, as much as it would be advantageous to have. I think we could do without it. I'm for 8 vehicles, and I'm definitely not gonna argue about the laptops or the video recorded cameras.
Did those numbers reflect in your 15 original cars? So those numbers will be reduced if you go down to 6 cars or 8 cars or whatever the number is?
Yes, he's at 675 right now, he's
For
at
the-
15 cars at 45,000. If we went down to 8, that would lower that number down to 360,000 from 675.
I'm talking about for the equipment.
We'd still need that for all the cars.
I just have one more question about the officers, if we could just go back to that, so I could understand it. So if by chance your S2s, you decide to make those an officer and bring in new S2s,
Yes.
do the S2s, are their salary commensurate with the officers themselves, or are they at a lower salary than the officers are?
So if I take a Class 2.
Class 2, sorry, I
Yeah,
called it
class-
S2,
it's-
forgive me.
Okay, it's fine. Class 2 is making, it's $20 an hour that the part-time officers are making. I would start them off they've already went to the academy, so I would start them off at a probationary rate, which is about $33,000. And then obviously with a $25,000 benefit package in there, you're talking about $60,000 for 1 new officer.
But you would have an officer that's ready to go.
There's no training.
There's no training, he's
Yeah,
ready to
so-
rock.
So,
Yeah, exactly. So it's a 3-month training program that we have. So if I brought in another police officer, a trained police officer from another police department to begin working in the Howell Police Department, they have a minimum of a 3-month training and FTO period that they have to go. That has already been done as with the Class 2. So with the whole intention of this is how we'll do, we'll groom a new officer.
Right.
This way, we can see what this person's like, we can see their attendance history, see their dedication, and when it's time to hire, so as soon as I get the approval, you guys are going to get first dibs at it. You may not get it at all. I may find someone that's better than you. So make yourself look like a superstar. And the 2 that I recommended back in December is the 2 that have stood out. Now, on that note, I also gave back $50,000 on my last year's budget. I had $50,000 left over, and I could have spent it. There's things I could have bought, but I decided to give it back. So just another consideration.
Well, I think that's a really good succession plan with the officers, so I think that's great. So I would totally go with that. And you're replacing the OEM truck because, is it an addition or replacement?
No, that's
That's not him.
I missed that.
Oh, well, it's under vehicle, sorry. Sorry.
That was discussed prior to your arriving, Mayor, and that was stricken from the budget.
Yeah,
I
No,
let the
it's
deputy
all right,
mayor
it's all right,
know.
it's all right, it's all right.
yeah, we already,
Sorry. At least I had the question, right? So you know I'm paying attention.
All right, can we just recap again one more time on this officer situation? As opposed to the 2 officers, he'd like 1 new officer. The remaining monies to be used for the part-timers at $20.50
well, that's the
an hour?
SLE3s.
The Class 2s, Class 2s.
Class 2.
Folks, Class 2s.
$20 an hour is the SLE3s. They're the ones in the schools right now.
Yeah, but that's, I don't want to talk about
No,
that.
no,
That's
no, no,
different.
no, no, no.
No.
No, the
The
twos
Class
are at the
2s, he's
same.
talking about what the Class 2s make.
Yeah,
I
because-
understand the Class 2s aren't $20 an hour,
Yeah, they are.
Oh, yes, they are.
Just asking.
but they are too?
They used to be low, and then we raised it a few years ago. And it's,
But you just said the Class 2s are $33,000.
That's if you bring
That's
him
That's
in.
if you bring them in as an
if you-
officer.
Because her question was, what happens to their salary once they become a police officer? So they go from making $20 an hour to making $33,000 to $35,000 an hour.
Okay.
I mean,
A year.
A year, yeah.
And then you had the packet, the bennies. Okay, and the new officers that could come as a result of potential retirements, we can authorize that now, even though we don't know when it could happen?
I don't
Why
think we
not?
should. I think we can say it's a good idea.
I mean, what do we do,
and-
Chuck,
yeah,
we put
because-
money in a envelope in a drawer and wait?
No, it's already
if they're
there.
retired, the money's
So the
there.
money's
Okay.
already in the
That's true.
budget.
The money's there.
Okay,
Their
Money's already in the
that's
budget.
right.
Chief, we budgeted $180,000 last year for improvements to the building. Where are we at with that, work-wise?
Wow, I didn't even realize that. That was in my budget?
Could be
Last year. Last year, we approved $180,000 for bathrooms, for upgrades
Oh, okay. Yeah, that wasn't in my budget. That was capital,
two
right?
per one.
in capital,
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
under your,
Yeah.
Yeah, the golden
Yeah, we're-
toilets, we spoke about this, right, Barney?
Deputy Mayor, we're working on that right now.
so no work
it's in-
has been done.
It's in design.
So it's in design.
Actually, it's-
And then we're asking for another $60,000 for the kitchen and break room renovations.
They can't exceed, we just can't exceed that salary.
yes, so let me just go over that. So, is it 60,000 or 30,000 I put in there for the kitchen?
35,000 for the kitchen and
Oh,
bathroom.
35, I'm sorry,
Yeah, okay.
60 security.
Yeah, so let me just touch on the security. This is where I would invite each of you to come down to the police department. I don't want us to discuss them on the public forum, but I will tell you this. So we are now required under corrections, under state corrections. We failed basically our cell block. So I know I went over
We
this
we
before.
received a memo on that.
Yeah,
We-
so we were granted a waiver, however, what the waiver states is that basically you're not exempt from it. We're just basically telling you that you're waived for right now because you're trying to make those improvements. So last year, I budgeted $30,000 to take care of 3 cells, and then another $30,000 this year to take care of the other 3 cells, where we have to take the bars off the front and now add a solid wall with a door on it, because apparently our cells are no longer authorized by the state. It was a problem on a state level. The State Chiefs Association basically got involved in this because there were so many police departments that got affected by this, and towns as well, as now you have police chiefs asking for all this money now to basically completely redo their cells. It was bad. We also failed for inadequate lighting. There was a couple other things that we had to do. That's all been resolved. They had a private company coming in and doing this. There were some issues. We fixed it for the most part, but the one thing that we can't fix is that the front of the jail cells. Also, there's some other security enhancements that absolutely need to be made within our police department. Again, I invite each of you to come down and take a look at it. When this building was designed being built back in 1989, security definitely wasn't a consideration for them.
There was different criteria back then, Chief.
I know, but even back then, you think that the most basics would be put in. And again, not revealing too much. I know some of you guys know.
You gotta be careful here.
It's a big concern.
Didn't your father-in-law design this building?
Yeah.
You just gotta be careful here.
I talked to him about that.
Okay.
And,
I wasn't opening my mouth, Mr. Law.
all right, so, again, if
What's the name of that building? Harvey F. Morrell Jr.
you've reminded me of that several times. Yeah, so, again, it's just some access control. Certain things need to be added, so to limit some access into certain areas. And the security cameras did a very good job on that. You guys approved that a few years ago under capital. That greatly enhanced our capabilities in our police department. We did some other things throughout, cost-saving measures, cutting down trees, trimming back bushes. I also implemented a couple security plans that the officers have to follow every time they have change of shifts. So we've done a lot of what we could do, but again, when you're talking about security, it costs money.
Yeah, I misspoke, Chief. I wasn't talking about the security. I'm just saying that we've are asked to approve $215,000 in building upgrades to kitchen and bathrooms, and we haven't even seen a design. I don't know, for me.
It's actually further along than design, Jim. They've been doing air handling studies for several months now.
I think that was something different in a different budget line item.
Yeah, you're talking about different things. The locker room upgrades were the ones that were authorized last year. That was 180. That's in design. We've been on hold as our HVAC contractor is replacing the HVAC system over there and balancing the system. So our design has been on hold for probably the last 3 to 4 months, waiting on that report. I was told by DPW today that the balancing was done yesterday, so I should have a report by the end of the week. We give that to our consultant. They continue to move forward with the design. That's the only thing that I'm working on right now with the capital budget.
So where am I thinking of two different things?
I have no idea.
I didn't say that. I said locker rooms and shower area was 180, correct?
180.
And now we're asking for another $35,000 in this capital budget for kitchen, break room renovations.
Yes, that's in the police
That's not
department. That is something that if you...
And I've seen that room, so I agree that it needs upgrades. But I'm just saying, $215,000 is being spent on locker rooms and kitchen, and we haven't even seen a design or know that that's the number that we're going to come in. So can we do a little bit more due diligence before we approve another $35,000 on top of the 180? When we're still in design, and say, can the 180 get us locker room and some renovations to the kitchen? The room size is changing, Chief, or is it going to be the same room?
It's the same
And get rid
size.
of the 1970 appliances you have in there and the 1964?
The RV kitchen?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It literally is an RV kitchen.
No, I've seen it.
So Deputy Mayor, I wasn't involved in this process here about the kitchen renovations. I wasn't even involved in the process about the locker rooms in the beginning. I picked it up because it needed an engineer to be picked up.
What I'm saying is we have some time, so maybe we could just get some feedback on that before we say yes or no? That's all
I
I'm
can work with
asking.
Andy and we can absolutely
that's
take a
all.
look at that.
It's fine.
So, could I just ask, so if you do have officers that probably or possibly will be retiring. Could we put it in there that he can bring on 2 officers not to exceed those salaries? So that we're sure that, he's going to get his officers and that the budget it'll be a neutral?
What I understand is he budgets.
Because
well, we
it's already
budget-
in there.
right,
It's
we
already in
budget-
there.
So when that officer retires, depending on how long time is left, then we'll see what that number is in salary-wise left.
Well, it would be,
If he-
it'll be,
And then you have to see if there's enough money in there to hire the 2.
Correct.
Because if the officer retires after fiscal, say in September, October, you may not have that money to
but it would be
get.
prorated, so the 2 officers would still be prorated. You're going to prorate on one side, but you're also going to prorate on the other side, right? You're going to hire me in September for 4 months. Right? But, so that money should still
There's a
be the
little bit more
same amount of
involved in
money.
that.
Understood.
It may be, it might be, but
A little bit more involved, but.
the
yeah,
money will still be
that'll
there.
no problem
so
for us.
you'll deal with it
Or
at the
just
time.
give the authorization to the manager, that way,
Yeah.
he can actually, on your behalf, say, okay, chief, if there's enough.
the retirees'
Yeah.
salary.
And they don't get full benefits when they first walk in the door either. I mean, there's other things that come into play. Or they may not have families, it may be a single, different things come into play when somebody, or maybe somebody under 26 that's still on their parents' policy till they're 26 with the new insurance thing. Different things come into play now that didn't come in years ago.
I don't think it's a responsible thing to do. I think we should be doing it when it happens.
What do you think, Brian? I mean, a scenario like that, with words to say that, a hiree under, not to exceed the amount of the retiring employee.
It would depend on the time of year that it happens, because there is an initial expense with purchasing equipment. I mean, that would be decreased if he's bringing on an officer that is already employed. He's not purchasing a weapon, all the uniforms, correct?
Correct. Except for his replacement, that would be a 2.
Right.
But that's covered, I have that, I have enough weapons, I have all that, that's all been taken into account.
So what's the answer in English?
If the
To
money's
wait.
there at the
To
time
be
of the
prudent and
retirement.
to wait.
And the answer, it's very simple. If 3 people up here say yes, the answer is yes. If 3 people up here don't say yes, the answer is not yes. It's that simple.
Well, it's not that simple. To say yes or no, you have to know what the whole.
Well, I'll say yes.
I would
have-
support-
Yeah, I don't have an issue. I don't think it's unreasonable.
I would support the 2-for-1, yes, as long as the money's there.
So will I.
So would I.
It seems reasonable to me. I don't, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, I don't think that the budget can get hurt that way.
And
And I'm
again,
depending on you, Brian, to tell me that, we could do this and we're safe to do it in that vein.
Right.
I would just suggest that, and I've said this before to Chief, I've supported that, but, at some time you have to do this. Is this going to be a policy in place forever, or is it just every budget?
No.
No, it's during the budget process.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, every year.
Well, that's true.
As people
You don't want
jump in,
anybody to
don't
ever say that,
everybody
hey,
make new
you said
policies.
2-for-1 every time there's an
Oh,
officer that
no,
retires.
no. It's for, if someone who's retiring at a top level, and then at budget time, I think we're discussing that.
at least I can have some direction for this year, so I can know where I can put the personnel.
If we do this, we should specify that it's for this year, and then maybe we'd be more comfortable if we knew we were working in a certain parameter.
Right.
As opposed to an open-ended precedent.
It's good
But
to be
that's-
clear.
Yeah,
It's specific for the 2018 budget.
reasonable?
Yes.
Mr. Manager?
All right, so somebody want to go over, so what was the recommendation for vehicles?
I recommended 8.
He agreed to 8, so, yeah.
And are we keeping in the emergency response vehicle or not?
Yes.
The
But
$175,000?
Yeah.
My vote's no.
No. We can't afford it.
Would be
Simple as
nice
that.
to, but
Right.
I'm not
It would
sure
be
that
nice,
this year
but-
is, I mean, we do have another,
just, I'll make it easy on you, just let's revisit it next year. Okay?
do I get to
You made it real easy on me.
That was quite gentlemanly of you.
Yes, yes.
It does make it easier.
I'll revisit it next year.
Yeah.
I have no more questions. Does anybody else have any more questions for the chief?
I do appreciate how you pitched.
Then we're gonna wait to see
I'm
about the
trying.
renovation. You just need a little more information on that?
Right.
On what?
The renovation, the kitchen?
I'll get you
So
something.
that's where we're at with that?
Yeah, I want more information before I say yes to that,
That's no
that's
problem.
all.
I'll get that to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm against it, I just,
In fact, it's actually going to be a lower amount since the last time because I was already able to buy additional chairs and replace the tables that were in there. So it's going to be
You're
actually
already singing the right song.
that's all.
doing my best.
Like within a week, you think you have it, or is that unrealistic?
No, I'll give-
And we all understand that they only borrow what they're gonna spend. So even though it's 35, it may come back as 25.
Right.
That's what they're gonna borrow is the 25.
Right.
That's between
For
purchasing.
public, just for the public edification.
No, I think that's good to say, and Chief just said, he had 50,000 left and he didn't spend it, and it came back to the.
We don't bond these numbers, we bond when we actually have the final numbers, that's all. So,
Well, it's our responsibility to see that all this is done properly.
absolutely. And then the last cost factor is EMS, that you're doing that too?
I'll call up. I'm going to take a little break, so I'm going to call up my EMS personnel. I'll call up Captain Starl, Lieutenant Fowler, and I'll call up Peggy Doyle up here to talk about that. There's really not too much to talk about. I mean, we cut out a lot of stuff.
You know, I really wanted more information, you know, when I was speaking with Lou and the manager about this, they said there were other things they were going through. I don't think we're gonna have the whole information tonight, based on what you've said to me. Am I wrong, or is it all here now?
For EMS?
EMS,
Yeah, this is here.
okay. Because we had some preliminary talks about this a few weeks ago. You said you were doing some other things.
I am making some modifications that'll hopefully make a difference on the revenue side, but as far as our expenses, they should still remain the same.
Okay. All right.
And then we're doing, and we used to have to do this.
Today?
They're all there.
What page are
I
we?
just wanna know what time I'm getting out of here.
Me too.
Still J8
Still on J8?
in the long one.
And the
And
big
page
book?
92 in the book.
92. Would it be, could I just take 5 minutes?
Go ahead.
Does anybody mind?
I'd like to get in and out if we could. Go ahead.
I mean, you could begin without me.
What?
You want to begin without me? Okay. Just
No
give me 5
problem.
I know they cut out the full-time maintenance and finished. I don't think we asked for anything ridiculous. I don't know if the ambulance was cut.
Let's go.
Service line.
Okay, let's
That's the
go.
way I wrote it out.
Let's go home.
Let's go home.
And the portable radios.
I'm okay.
Because all of the other agencies are switching over. Can't talk to you guys unless they're in the vehicle.
I'm fine, but I want to take you home. I don't like the way you look. Are you sure? Yeah, you would. Okay.
Thank you very much.
That too. That was moved. I removed it.
We're ready for you.
So, as part of our budget, I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with the capital?
No, let's start with the budget.
Okay.
As far as the capital, Lieutenant, I removed those portables out of
Okay.
capital, so there's no capital for EMS.
Okay. So, as part of the budget, we're asking for a full-time supervisor in addition to Coordinator Doyle, as well as a lot of our supplies, which are pretty much staying the same as they were last year. Oxygen, medical supplies, our scheduling software, as well as some additional contracts and uniform replacements, and some expenditures for public relations, as well as tuition for education. As you guys are aware, a lot of EMTs have to keep up their certifications. Every 3 years, they have to redo some of their certifications.
Are certifications being done in-house?
A lot of it, yeah.
But some of it isn't.
At this point, yes. We're hoping to do everything in-house, especially once we get into the new building and we have the room to do it. Sometimes it's just availability of training locations, as well as we're developing instructors throughout our unit where we can pretty much do it all in-house.
But that training line item is how much? I'm sorry, just let me, training,
10,000.
5,000.
I only see two major things here, in my eyes. I'm looking at, you want to go from full-time personnel from 67,000 to 172,000. That's a $110,000 jump in full-time personnel. Is that correct?
Correct. So the original proposal that we had was one administrative supervisor, which is the coordinator who oversees the entire program, and then also a supervisor under her, under Peggy, that oversees the operations, almost like a police department. Now, understanding that the licensing that we have here in a town, we're state regulated. All the first aid squads fall under our license. So for the compliance of, there's strict compliance when it comes to when you start billing with the state. Quality control, training, all those issues would be handled by the other supervisor who's currently doing it now part-time. And Councilman Walsh, if you remember, this was proposed 2 years ago. It was proposed again last year, and I was told to hold off, and now here we are again today. So it is, and I, you know, I hate to keep bringing this up, but the money that we make, because I never like to point at revenue, but it covers our overhead. This year, due to some policy changes that we made, now we brought in an extra $100,000 over what was projected to bring in. So that is only going to, having that person now full-time rather than part-time is going to be able to have that supervisor out there doing more quality control, being able to go out there and supervise the EMTs that are on calls, to be that supervisor that's needed out there on the road and not an administrative officer who stays inside the building. Peggy would be assigned to headquarters. The MS supervisor, the operations supervisor would be assigned to the building, assigned to the EMTs to oversee the EMTs and the licensing. It's just a model that I projected. Peggy doesn't take, benefits. She's on her husband, who is a retired police officer from Bricktown. So you basically would only be covering the benefits for one full-timer in the EMS unit.
Lou, I have a question. So in the budget, in the simplest of terms, so is his budget neutral, given the revenue that he brings in? Would this be a budget neutral event?
I mean, obviously, the revenue billing that we receive covers the full costs of this cost center, and then there's an excess which then goes to support the remaining cost centers of the budget.
Okay, but if we increased a person or half a person?
It's a half a person.
If we increase the half a person, would that still be covered by his revenue?
It would be covered by his revenue if you were to look at it, on a cost center basis, but then they would be absorbing more of those costs, and then the other costs that we use that excess to offset would then need to be funded through another source.
There's other costs involved also that we don't
Understood,
put back too,
understood.
but whatever you want to do is okay.
It gets dangerous when you start looking at core centers from,
Well, that's how we do it in the outside world. So I just wanted to know for my own edification.
Well, my initial conversations that I had with the manager last week was that, listen, I'm willing to go down a police officer instead of two. Give me that police officer, give me that one police officer, I'll take the cost of the other police officer, apply it towards another EMS supervisor, and with the remaining amount to my part-timers in the police department. That would cover what I wanted for the past few years now, as far as personnel. So I was willing to go down that one officer.
But we approved, we agreed with going down to the one officer and utilizing the dollar amount towards the class twos. So you're saying
Right.
that you could use that money for this part-time
Yes.
position?
Yes. Because the benefits that went to that second officer would go to the second EMS supervisor. The salary for that police officer would go to that other half of a position and to cover my part-timers. That's the way that I looked at it.
So in essence, we're getting one police officer, a part-time EMS, and additional class two time.
So you're getting one police officer, you're getting additional part-time staff in the police department, and you're getting a full-time EMS supervisor from a part-timer right now. And the person that would be doing the job right now. She's a paramedic, highly qualified. It's just that she would be bumped up to a full-time instead of a part-time.
What's she making now? Am I allowed
She's
to
making
say that?
$23.50 an hour.
Excuse me?
$23.50 an hour.
$23.50.
Yeah. And that was only because we increased the wages of the EMS unit from, it's been the same since the inception of it 11 years ago. So we scaled it. So now they make anywhere from $17 as a brand-new EMT to $23.50 if you're basically have paramedic certification. So we have paramedics on staff that are basically, providing BLS service. So the residents are getting high quality of service, that they normally would not get.
Does this position incur overtime?
No, salary.
but there was a reduction in this line item, so are you as the manager cutting that
Yeah, I
full-time?
had recommended cutting that. I apologize, I walked in the middle of this conversation.
So you,
But
okay.
how many part-timers do you have serving as supervisors?
We have one part-time supervisor, and then we have two, what we call crew chiefs, or road supervisors.
Okay, so you have a total of 4 supervisory personnel for this whole program?
Well, the two additional crew chiefs still ride the ambulance. They're not doing administrative duties. They're out actually working their shift. That's more so for times when Peggy's not working or the other supervisor's not working, that they have someone to go to in their chain of command should something occur.
So do Peggy and the second person work opposite schedules?
Most of the time they work during the day. They're available at opposite schedules, yeah. They don't work opposite schedules. They have an on-call status if need be, if those additional supervisors aren't working. We run 3 shifts a day, so those 2 additional supervisors aren't working every single time. It just doesn't work out like that. So when they're not working, they would contact Peggy or Melissa.
And this was put in place because of that second full-timer wasn't hired. Peggy actually came to me, this was probably the beginning of last year, and she says, hey, can we actually take 2 of my really good EMTs, can we actually just give them a little bump and give them a little bit of more administrative duties besides them, riding the ambulance? In fact, I think it is, like during their downtime as they're riding the
During
ambulance,
the downtime.
they're doing all these secondary responsibilities instead of just sitting there waiting for a call to come in. So are they supervisors, not supervisors? They're doing tasks that kind of would be designed for a supervisor, but, obviously,
And they're being compensated for it. So by creating another full-time position, what's going to happen with that extra?
would we back off?
Compensation
Would we
and
back
those
off that? Because that
tasks.
was the whole purpose of having him, was to basically take the place of a full-timer.
I think they're both being compensated at a normal rate, isn't he getting the paramedic rate?
Yeah, he's
At
getting.
least one of the supervisors is being compensated more because he's a paramedic. He's not getting any more for that supervisory position. Kind of evens out.
I don't think that's accurate. At least personnel notice that I just saw recently.
The same as your supervisor?
Paramedic rate goes, well, it's 50, I'm sorry, it's 50 cent different.
Is it 50 cent
50
different?
cent different.
Okay.
I just saw I asked for from 67,000 to 172,000.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big jump. We were
Yeah.
looking at,
And then, we decided, I set that salary equivalent to almost hers. Obviously, that could be scaled back. That's something that we can work on. But again, I was willing to go down that extra officer to have that extra EMS supervisor because it's been a position I've been looking to fill for the past 3 years. Manager and I spoke about it. I think maybe some further conversations need to be held concerning this.
yeah, that's what
Yeah, so.
that's kind of what I alluded to
If
before.
you could just,
We started this.
if you could just hold off on a decision for right now on that, and let us have some additional conversations on that.
I would rather have clarity,
Yeah.
because we did speak some, and that's why I want to make sure.
There's some concerns that the
We
manager
still have
has.
we still have another budget meeting, so let's just do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows, and this is where I kind of back off. The manager knows the EMS world. He's involved in this. That's not my area of expertise. I can only tell you what happens here in Howell. So obviously, him and I have been having some conversations about it. So if we can continue that and get my EMS supervisors involved in this as well, we can do that.
Yeah, I'd rather decide this at a later date with more definitive things.
And there's no capital.
No capital, I removed it.
We're done with that, right? Any other thing?
You're all right with our operating?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, they're still going to get back to you on, really, the only question is full-time versus part-time.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure you're all right with the operating, O&E portion of their budget.
Well, we're going to trust your expertise some on this. You've been doing this for a long time also.
Okay.
I mean, do you think we should be cutting more off their operating?
No?
Okay.
Well, so is
Thank
it
you.
what, 14,000 increase from last year? Is that how I'm looking at it, or was,
The operating?
It's about,
Yeah, it was like
10,000.
9,000 more than last year.
Well, they went up supplies, 5,000.
Yeah. $9,823 shows us the number. The change. I just think we got to straighten out with the personnel, be more definitive on what direction we're going to go in there.
And again, you talk about the supplies and the operating costs. The manager and I both had this conversation, and I also had the conversation with my EMS personnel, this is going back last week, about keeping tighter controls over some of our supplies. You don't need to be walking around with a pocket full of gloves when each box costs $20. So it's those small things that we're putting in place just to control some of the costs.
Is there software in place for that kind of stuff? You have
There's actually large vending machines that you can buy where the person has to put in a code and it then drops out. But we're going to just actually, they're expensive. We're just going to have a cage and where the supervisors basically don't have the key for it.
the software is expensive as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes the return on the investment,
Agreed.
today,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but you only have that upfront money.
But you have
Investments
car
up
levels
front money.
and stuff like that, right?
You have what?
I
Car
know.
levels.
Investments are upfront
In
money.
English, Teresa, the, just levels of how many boxes that you order, and you have
Yes.
it in and out, and,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, like accountability.
Some, yeah, I can't think of what,
But like quality control?
yeah.
Yeah, but, and the police
Amounts,
officers, I mean,
thank
I was guilty of it as well. You end up with 3 boxes of gloves in the back trunk, in your cruiser. You don't need 3 boxes. One's completely destroyed and filled with dry chemical from an extinguisher going off. I mean, it's those things that we need to put tighter controls on because there's no use, in having ruined boxes of supplies.
Trust me, I'm aware.
The benefit is that The PD side, we can use all expired stuff, we can use expired, water, we can use expired gloves. On the EMS side, now that we're
Can't.
billing, everything has to remain, valid, so,
You're talking my language.
yep. But again,
Good. So nothing's wasted, everything's used.
yeah, yes. Yeah, once it expires, it goes over to the PD side. So,
Like a stepchild.
yeah, yeah. The one thing we didn't cover,
Just a younger child.
the one thing we didn't cover is my communications. Did we cover that?
No, not yet.
No, what's next?
Okay, all right. I thought you were
Don't be
looking.
jumping the gun. What a pun that was. Look at that.
Yeah.
What's the next page?
Did I take, what's just the licensing and communications with it? What we doing?
Page
Dispatch
97 in the book,
is next.
or J8 in the long form.
What's the number in the big book?
97.
Thank you. Lou, I know I didn't say it before, but thank you for this document.
Absolutely, Mayor, and you will be provided a similar document for the departments that will be here for Thursday as well.
Thank you. I hope was this helpful to anybody?
I think so.
Yeah, good. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good
How are
evening.
you?
Please.
Want to go over capital or
What would you want to go over?
No, let's do the budget first.
budget?
Budget first. Thank you.
All the operating budgets are covering maintenance costs. There's an increase in Motorola because we were added the new radio system. And we're including WatchGuard annual maintenance and we were talking before about data storage with IT. We're including some data storage for our WatchGuard system. The WatchGuard system is the video system for the in-car cameras. When it was first designed, the storage was for the in-car cameras only, and when we started adding body cameras, we quickly used up that exceeded the storage capabilities. So we're looking to, as a cost, more efficient in costs, is to go towards a cloud service. Prior to last year, we were prohibited by the Attorney General's office. There was a clarification, and the Attorney General's office has now given the police departments the ability to start utilizing cloud services under restrictive conditions. So we're going to take advantage of that.
So is there a cost on a monthly recurring cost on that?
This is a yearly cost. It would be $15,000 would be the yearly
Annually?
cost. Yes.
Does that go up every year, any year, or?
Typically, maintenance costs are typically 2%. And that, with the Amazon Cloud Services, the WatchGuard annual maintenance, the Motorola costs, those are the significant increases in the O&E as compared to last year. And then the normal maintenance costs are about 2%, 1% to 2% higher.
The police budget already. Do you
Was
guys
it?
have something different than what we have? Do you have that, what he's talking about?
172.
I just want to make sure that you're covering the same thing you're covering.
I don't,
Yeah, I don't recall you covering it in the,
That was all under... that's all under-
433?
That's all under my communications maintenance, that's all under my police budget.
Okay.
Is that what we're looking at here? Or are we looking at the actual dispatch?
No,
911?
dispatch.
911?
But you have in your
Oh,
O&E
okay.
and your police,
Yeah.
that's what I was,
Okay.
that's why I was
That's what you're
cross-referencing.
Are you looking at that?
Yeah, I was trying to find what he was saying.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Yeah, no, it's already been...
Oh, okay.
So
I'm
what
sorry.
we're looking at here is your employees,
Oh.
their salaries.
That's it?
That's all they have in your, in
That's it.
your
Yep.
line.
Meals, communications, maintenance, training, education, That's it, that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at something here.
I only have one question for you, Lou,
Yes, sir.
and this was for Lou. Social Security employer share was
I
was
was just gonna bring that up.
57,000 covered in 2017. Why is it down to, why is only 40,000 being budgeted for in 2018?
after,
When the
excuse-
salaries are the same?
Excuse me, I think that's after the manager cut that. Because if it says, request,
No, I'm looking at the carryover, ma'am.
yeah, look at where it says request.
I am
It says
looking at
request,
it.
it says $81,200. The manager's, adjustment says 41,000. Follow that.
I am.
So I think we should be addressing Brian.
The incumbent 57.
Hold on, encumbered was 57 on 12/31/2017. Budgeted is 40,000, but the salaries are $8,000 more than they were in 2017. Why is the social security number down?
So really.
You see what I mean, don't you?
At a 6.25% match, unless somebody's older that's working there, what am I missing?
But, Mr. Walsh, you addressed that to Brian because it's because of, it's the manager's adjustment. Before you got to the manager's adjustment, it was accurate.
I asked Lou.
Yeah, but Brian cut it, not Lou.
Well, the both of us.
They work together.
We work together on it.
Hold on,
Trust me, I rely heavily on Lou.
hold on, the CFO's gotta be looking at these numbers.
Well, I have a different question. Why is that in this budget and not in any other budget?
The reason, okay, the reason why Social Security costs are handled separately, in the budget, we have our appropriations cap. Dispatch services is still one of the cost centers that is an out-of-cap expense. So the Social Security costs for the entire workforce are budgeted in our statutory line item, but all of the related costs that go along with dispatch are budgeted separately, so that this is more of a state requirement for us to have to budget it in separately, so to speak. So whatever is charged there, we try to stay as close to what we feel is going to be paid out in salary and wages. If we do come up close to where we're going to be potentially over expending this can also be charged to the regular Social Security cost, because what's budgeted is based on 7.65% of what's budgeted. So if we don't pay out all the overtime, don't pay out all the salaries, then all of the Social Security costs won't be used. So Brian and I thought that we could have adjusted this down a little bit lower. And there are other places within the budget that if we do come up to where, where it could be cutting it close, we can absolutely cover for it from another area.
Okay. Answers that.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Walsh?
Not good, but that's what you wanna do, it, you feel free.
Well, answers your question. You don't have to agree with it.
I just, so noted, Councilwoman. 6.25% matching Social Security on $850,000 is more than $40,000.
That's right.
Period, end of discussion.
Should be closer than accurate. Too accurate, I mean.
And there's no capital in communications.
One question.
Just the only thing that you see that was cut was some of the part-time wages. We were implementing, in order to reduce the overtime for the dispatchers, to backfill them with part-timers. I mean, that was the only concern I had with the removal of the part-timers. The part-time wages was to try to save on the overtime costs, but
And also use them as a mentoring so that we can keep our.
right.
Much like the
supply
SLEO
of-
So
too.
Right.
we can work with, we understand the cuts, we can work with what you gave us, that's fine. And the manager's already discussed it with me.
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't have anything.
Not for me.
I think we're okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
You like that, huh?
Are we done for the day?
Easy this year.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, that concludes all the departments we had scheduled for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open this up for the hearing of the citizens. If anybody wants to come up. Thank you, Chief.
Just so you won't.
You gotta take off the badge. The tie doesn't count.
Young lady, but I'm married.
Sandra Solly, Birdsall Road, Farmingdale. I wanted to ask a question about this revenue sheet. It says rental income. Last year was $686,000, now it says here anticipated, $150,000. What's that?
We had a large tenant move out and broke their lease unexpectedly, so we removed that revenue line from the budget. We are working to find a new tenant.
Was it $500,000?
Yes.
Ooh, that's what I was wondering, because I saw the sign on the door. So, that's a lot.
Yes, it is.
Better put an ad out for rent outside, let people know it's available.
We've already interviewed commercial brokers. We're working on it. The manager's diligently working on it.
We have their 2 units, correct? Did they have 2 units? 2 units?
They had more than that.
More
Network?
than that.
They had about 70% of the downstairs.
Well, the one, Suite H, a couple of months ago, that was available. Is that one of theirs? Suite H, I think?
They downsized before they left.
They were still paying rent on units they were no longer occupying.
All right.
They downsized before they left. About 3 months ago, they let go of about 50 workers. 'Cause
Wow.
they knew somebody that was in that group.
Yeah, because that's a lot. Extremely a lot. Unbelievable, 80%. All right, thank you.
We did account for the loss of that revenue in this budget. Just
Is there anything else?
Anybody else?
Is there anything else from anybody else?
We have a budget meeting Thursday, right?
Yes, sir. So the next meeting, I would close this portion of the hearing of the citizens. The next meeting date is Thursday, February 15th at 4 PM. I would entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Roll call?
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mayor Berger?
Yes, ma'am.